Chapter 15. How the Red Ferret Came to Cosford. The old chronicler in his Geste du Sieur Nigel has bewailed his broken narrative, which rose from the fact that out of 31 years of warfare, no less than 7 were spent by his hero at one time or another in the recovery from his wounds or from those illnesses which arose from privation and fatigue. Here at the very threshold of his career, on the eve of a great enterprise, this very fate befell him. Stretched upon a couch in a low-roofed and ill-furnished chamber, which looks down from under the machicolated corner turret upon the inner court of the castle of Calais, he lay half unconscious and impotent, while great deeds were doing under his window, wounded in 3 places, and with his head splintered by the sharp pommel of the ferret's mace. He hovered betwixt life and death, his shattered body drawing him downward, his youthful spirit plucking him up. As in some strange dream, he was aware of that deed of arms within the courtyard below. Dimly it came back to his memory afterwards, a sudden startled shout, the crash of metal, the slamming of great gates, the roar of many voices, the clang, 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 as of 50 lusty smiths upon their anvils, and then at last the dwindling of the hubbub, the low groans and sudden shrill cries to the saints, the measured murmur of many voices, the heavy clanking of armored feet. Sometime in that fell struggle he must have drawn his weakened body as far as a narrow window, and hanging to the iron bars have looked down on the wild scene beneath him. In the red glare of torches held from windows and from roof, he saw the rush and swirl of men below, the ruddy light shining back from glowing brass and gleaming steel. As a wild vision it came to him afterward, the beauty and the splendor, the flying lambrequins, the jeweled crests, the blazonry and richness of surcoat and of shield, where sable and gules, argent and vey, in every pattern of saltire, bend, or chevron, glowed beneath him like a drift of many-colored blossoms, tossing, sinking, stooping into shadow, springing into light. There glared the blood-red gules of Chandos, and he saw the tall figure of his master, a thunderbolt of war, raging in the van. There, too, were the 3 black chevrons on the golden shield which marked the noble Manny. That strong swordsman must surely be the royal Edward himself, since only he and the black-armored, swift-footed youth at his side were marked by no symbol of heraldry. Manny, Manny, George for England, rose the deep-throated bay, and ever the gallant counter-cry, Achani, Achani, Saint Denis for France, thundered amid the clash and thudding of the battle. Such was the vague, whirling memory still lingering in Nigel's mind when at last the mist cleared away from it, and he found himself weak, but clear on the low couch in the corner turret. Beside him, crushing lavender betwixt his rough fingers and strewing it over floor and sheets, was Aylward the archer. His longbow leaned at the foot of the bed, and his steel cap was balanced on the top of it, while he himself, sitting in his shirt sleeves, fanned off the flies and scattered the fragrant herbs over his helpless master. "By my hilt," he cried with a sudden shout, every tooth in his head gleaming with joy, "I thank the Virgin and all the saints for this blessed sight. I had not dared to go back to Tilford had I lost you. 3 weeks have you lain there and babbled like a babe, but now I see in your eyes that you are your own men again." "I have indeed had some small hurt," said Nigel feebly, "but it is shame and sorrow that I should lie here if there is work for my hands. Whither go you, archer?" "To tell the good Sir John that you are mending." "Nay, bide with me a little longer. Aylward, I can call to mind all that has passed. There was a bickering of small boats, was there not? And I chanced upon a most worthy person and exchanged handstrokes with him. He was my prisoner, was he not? He was, fair sir. And where is he now?" "Below in the castle." A smile stole over Nigel's pale face. "I know what I will do with him," said he. "I pray you to rest, fair sir," said Aylward anxiously. "The king's own leech saw you this morning, and he said that if the bandage was torn from your head you would surely die." "Nay, good archer, I will not move. But tell me what befell upon the boat." "There is little to tell, fair sir. Had this ferret not been his own squire and taken so long a time to don his harness, it is likely that they would have had the better of us. He did not reach the battle till his comrades were on their backs. Him we took to the Marie Rose, because he was your man. The others were of no worth, so we threw them into the sea. The quick and the dead, every man of them. It was an evil deed." Aylward shrugged his shoulders. I tried to save one boy, said he, but cockbatting would not have it, and he had Black Simon and the others at his back. It is a custom of the narrow seas, said they, today for them, tomorrow for us. Then they tore him from his hold and cast him screaming over the side. By my hilt, I have no love for the sea and its customs, so I care not if I never set foot on it again when it has once borne me back to England. Nay, there are great happenings upon the sea, and many worthy people to be found upon ships, said Nigel. In all parts, if one goes far enough upon the water, one would find those whom it would be joy to meet. If one crosses over the narrow sea, as we have done, we come on the French who are so needful to us. For how else would we win worship? Or if you go south, then in time one may hope to come to the land of the unbelievers, where there is fine skirmishing and much honor for him who will venture his person. Bethink you, archer, how fair a life it must be when one can ride forth in search of advancement with some hope of finding many debonair cavaliers upon the same quest. And then if one be overborne, one has died for the faith, and the gates of heaven are open before you. So also the sea to the north is a help to him who seeks honor, for it leads to the country of the Eastlanders and to those parts where the heathen still dwell who turn their faces from the blessed gospel. They also a man might find some small deeds to do, and by St. Paul, Elwood, if the French hold the truce and the good Sir John permits us, I would fain go down into those parts. The sea is a good friend to the cavalier, for it takes him where he may fulfill his vows. Elwood shook his head, for his memories were too recent, but he said nothing, because at this instant the door opened and Chandos entered. With joy in his face, he stepped forward to the couch and took Nigel's hand in his. Then he whispered a word in Elwood's ear, who hurried from the room. Pardieu, this is a good sight, said the knight. I trust that you will soon be on your feet again. I crave your pardon, my honoured lord, that I have been absent from your side, said Nigel. In truth my heart was sore for you, Nigel, for you have missed such a night as comes seldom in any man's life. All went even as we had planned. The postern gate was opened, and a party made their way in, but we awaited them, and all were taken or slain. But the greater part of the French had remained without upon the plain of Newlet. So we took horse and went out against them. When we drew near them, they were surprised, but they made good cheer among themselves, calling out to each other, If we fly, we lose all. It is better to fight on, in the hopes that the day may be ours. This was heard by our people in the van, who cried out to them, By St. George, you speak truth. Evil befall him who thinks of flying. So they held their ground like worthy people for the space of an hour, and there were many there whom it is always good to meet. Sir Geoffrey himself, and Sir Pepin de Ware, with Sir John de Landers, old Balliol the Yellow Tooth, and his brother Hector the Leopard. But above all Sir Eustace de Beaumont was at great pains to meet us worthily, and he was at hand-strokes with the king for a long time. Then, when we had slain or taken them, all the prisoners were brought to a feast which was ready for them, and the knights of England waited upon them at the table and made good cheer with them. And all this, Nigel, we owe to you. The squire flushed with pleasure at the words. Nay, most honoured lord, it was but a small thing which I have been able to do. But I thank God and Our Lady that I have done some service, since it has pleased you to take me with you to the wars. Should it chance. But the words were cut short upon Nigel's lips, and he lay back with amazed eyes staring from his pallid face. The door of his little chamber had opened, and who was this? The tall, stately man with the noble presence, the high forehead, the long, handsome face, the dark, brooding eyes. Who but the noble Edward of England? How, my little cock of Tilford Bridge, I still bear you in mind, said he. Right glad I was to hear that you had found your wits again, and I trust that I have not helped to make you take leave of them once more. Nigel's stay of astonishment had brought a smile to the king's lips. Now the squire stammered forth some halting words of gratitude at the honour done to him. Nay, thank me not, for I could do no less, seeing that it is to you that I owe him. But it was not thanks which Nigel was trying to utter. It was hard to frame his words, and yet they must be said. Sire, he murmured, it becomes me to cross your royal will. The dark Plantagenet wrath gathered upon the king's high brow and gloomed in his fierce deep-set eyes. By God's dignity, No man has ever crossed it yet and lived unscathed. How now, young sir, what mean such words, to which we are little wont? Have a K, for this is no light thing which you venture. Sire, said Nigel, in all matters in which I am a free man, I am ever your faithful liege, but some things there which may not be done. How? Cried the king. In spite of my will. In spite of your will, sire, said Nigel, sitting up on his couch, with white face and blazing eyes. Nigel faced the king with a face as grim as his own. You may not put to death the red ferret. Pardieu, and why? But this I tell you, and you also, young man, that as God is my help, ere the sun has set this night, the red ferret will hang as a warning to all spies and traitors from the highest tower Calais, that every ship upon the narrow seas, and every man for 10 miles round may see him as he swings, and know how heavy is the hand of the English king. Do you bear it in mind, lest you also may feel its weight. With a glare like an angry lion he walked from the room, and the iron-clamped door clanged loudly behind him. Chandos and Nigel looked ruefully at each other. Then the knight patted his squire upon his bandaged head. My fair and honoured lord, cried Nigel, I am heavy at heart, for indeed I could do no other, and yet I have brought trouble upon you. I pray that it will rest easy in paradise, said Nigel. For at the hour that I hear that I am dishwanted and my prisoner slain, I tear this bandage from my head, and so end all things. I will not live when once my word is broken. Nay, nay, cried the ferret. It would be a sad thing if a man of my position was worth less than 5,000. 8,000 will suffice, fair sir, to pay my charges for the war. You will not again play the spy, nor do us harm until the truce is broken. That I will swear. And lastly, there is a journey that you shall make. Nay, said Nigel, but it is to a land which is holy to me. You will make your way back to Southampton. I will bear it in mind. At Cosford you will see a good knight named Sir John Butethorn, and you will ask of speech with his daughter, the Lady Mary. I will do so. And what shall I say to the Lady Mary, who lives at Cosford on the slope of a long hill 2 leagues from the fair town of Guildford? Say only that I sent my greeting, and that St. Catherine has been my friend. Only that and nothing more. And now leave me, I pray you, for my head is weary and I would fain have sleep. Thus it came about that a month later, on the eve of the feast of St. Matthew, the Lady Mary, as she walked front Cosford gates, met with a strange horseman, richly clad, a serving man behind him, looking shrewdly about him with quick blue eyes, which twinkled from a red and freckled face. At sight of her he doffed his hat and reined his horse. The lady bowed her proud dark head. It was a bright, sunshiny morning when Nigel found himself at last able to leave his turret chamber and to walk upon the rampart of the castle. There was a brisk northern wind, heavy and wet with the salt of the sea, and he felt, as he turned his face to it, fresh life and strength surging in his blood and bracing his limbs. He took his hand from Aylward's supporting arm and stood with his cap off, leaning on the rampart and breathing in the cool, strong air. Far off upon the distant skyline, half hidden by the heave of the waves, was a low white fringe of cliffs which skirted England. It was a long trumpet-shaped engine of leather and iron bolted into a rude wooden stand and fitted with wheels. Beside it lay a heap of metal slugs and lumps of stone. The end of the machine was raised and pointed over the battlement. Behind it stood an iron box which Nigel opened. It was filled with a black coarse powder, like gritty charcoal. It makes a strange sound. Archer, does it not? Said Nigel wistfully. So I have heard, fair sir, even as the bow twangs, so it also has a sound when you loose it. There is no one to hear, since we are alone upon the rampart, nor can it do scathe, since it points to sea. I pray you to loose it, and I will listen to the sound. He bent over the bombard with an attentive ear, while Aylward, stooping his earnest brown face over the touch-hole, scrape away diligently with a flint and steel. A moment later both he and Nigel were seated some distance off upon the ground, while amid the roar of the discharge and a thick cloud of smoke, they had a vision of the long black snake-like engine shooting back upon the recoil. For a minute or more they were struck motionless with astonishment while the reverberations died away and the smoke wreaths curled slowly up to the blue heavens. "Good luck," cried Nigel at last, picking himself up and looking round him. "Good luck, and heaven be my aid. I thank the Virgin that all stands as it did before. I thought that the castle had fallen." "Such a bull's bellow I have never heard," cried Aylward, rubbing his injured limbs. "One could hear it from Frensham Pond to Guildford Castle. I would not touch one again, not for a hide of the best land in Puttenham. I knew not its power, fair lord. But not yet, I trust, honoured sir. I am ready for any task, my good and honoured lord." The last tidings have been of disaster, and the king's soul is dark with wrath for that his friend and comrade Gilles de St. Paul has been done to death in the castle of La Brohinière. He will send succours to the country, and we go at their head. How like you that, Nigel? My honoured lord, what could I ask for better? Then have your harness ready, for we start within the week. Our path by land is blocked by the French, and we go by sea. This night the king gives a banquet ere he returns to England, and your place is behind my chair. Be in my chamber that you may help me to dress, and so we will to the hall together. With satin and with samite, with velvet and with fur, the noble Chandos was dressed for the king's feast, and Nigel too had donned his best silk jupon, faced with the 5 scarlet roses, that he might wait upon him. In the great hall of Calais Castle the tables were set, a high table for the lords, a second one for the less distinguished knights, and a third at which the squires might feast when their masters were seated. Never had Nigel in his simple life at Tilford pictured a scene of such pomp and wondrous luxury. The grim grey walls were covered from ceiling to floor with priceless tapestry of Arras, where hart, hounds, and huntsmen circled the great hall with one long living image of the chase. Over the principal table drooped a line of banners, and beneath them rows of emblazoned shields upon the wall carried the arms of the high noblemen who sat beneath. The red light of cressets and of torches burned upon the badges of the great captains of England. The lions and lilies shone over the high dorseret chair in the centre, and the same august device marked with a cadency label indicated the seat of the prince, while glowing to right and to left were the long lines of noble insignia, honoured in peace and terrible in war. There shone the gold and sable of Manny, the engrailed cross of Suffolk, the red chevron of Stafford, the scarlet and gold of Audley, the blue lion rampant of the Percys, the silver swallows of Arundel, the red roebuck of the Montacutes, the star of the De Veres, the silver scallops of Russell, the purple lion of De Lacy, and the black crosses of Clinton. "I have heard of him as a man of great valor," said Nigel, gazing at him with interest. "Indeed, you may well say so, Master Loring. He is the bravest knight in England, and in Christendom also, as I believe. No man hath done such deeds of valor." Nigel looked at his new acquaintance with hope in his eyes. "You speak as it becomes you to speak when you uphold your own master," said he. "For the same reason, Master Delves, and in no spirit of ill will to you, it behoves me to tell you that he is not to be compared in name or fame with the noble knight on whom I wait. Should you hold otherwise, then surely we can debate the matter in whatever way or time may please you best." Delves smiled good-humouredly. "Nay, be not so hot," said he. "Had you upheld any other knight, say perhaps Sir Walter Manny, I had taken you at your word, and your master or mine would have had place for a new squire. But indeed it is only truth that no knight is second to Chandos, nor would I draw my sword to lower his pride a place. Ha! Sir James' cup is low. I must see to it." He darted off, a flagon of Gascony in his hand. "The king hath had good news tonight," he continued when he returned. "I have not seen him in so merry a mind since the night when we took the Frenchman, and he laid his pearl chaplet upon the head of de Ribeaumont. See how he laughs, and the prince also. That laugh bodes him one little good, or I am the more mistaken. Have a care. Sir John's plate is empty." It was Nigel's turn to dart away, but ever in the intervals he returned to the corner whence he could look down the hall and listen to the words of the older squire. Delves was a short, thick-set man past middle age, weather-beaten and scarred, with a rough mien and bearing which showed that he was more at his ease in a tent than a hole. But 10 years of service had taught him much, and Nigel listened eagerly to his talk. Indeed, the king has some good tidings, he continued. See now, he has whispered it to Chandos and to Manny. Manny spreads it on to Sir Reginald Cobham, and he to Robert Knowles, each smiling like the devil over a friar. Which is Sir Robert Knowles? Asked Nigel with interest. I have heard much of him and his deeds. He is a tall, hard-faced man in yellow silk, he with the hairless cheeks and the split lip. He is little older than yourself, and his father was a cobbler in Chester, yet he has already won the golden spurs. See how he dabs his great hand in the dish and hands forth the gobbets. He is more used to a camp kettle than a silver plate. The big man with the black beard is a Bartholomew Burghirsch, whose brother is the abbot of Beaulieu. Haste, haste, for the boar's head is come and the plates to be cleaned. The table manners of our ancestors at this period would have furnished to the modern the strangest mixture of luxury and of barbarism. Forks were still unknown, and the courtesy fingers, the index and the middle of the left hand, took their place. To use any others was accounted the worst of manners. A crowd of dogs lay among the rushes growling at each other and quarreling over the gnawed bones which were thrown to them by the feasters. A slice of coarse bread served usually as a plate, but the king's own high table was provided with silver platters, which were wiped by the squire or page after each course. On the other hand, the table linen was costly, and the courses, served with a pomp and dignity now unknown, comprised such a variety of dishes and such complex marvels of cookery as no modern banquet could show. Besides all our domestic animals and every kind of game, such strange delicacies as hedgehogs, bustards, porpoises, squirrels, bitterns, and cranes lent variety to the feast. Each new course, heralded by a flourish of silver trumpets, was borne in by liveried servants walking two and two, with rubicund marshals strutting in front and behind, bearing white ones in their hands, not only as badges of their office, but also as weapons with which to repel any impertinent inroad upon the dishes in the journey from the kitchen to the hall. Boars' heads, enammed and endered with gilt tusks and flaming mouths, were followed by wondrous pasties molded to the shape of ships, castles, and other devices with sugar seamen or soldiers who lost their own bodies in their fruitless defense against the hungry attack. Finally came the great nef, a silver vessel upon wheels laden with fruit and sweetmeats, which rolled with its luscious cargo down the line of guests. Flagons of Gascony, of Rhine wine, of Canary and of Rochelle were held in readiness by the attendants, but the age, though luxurious, was not drunken, and the sober habits of the Norman had happily prevailed over the license of those Saxon banquets where no guest might walk from the table without a slur upon his host. Honour and hardihood go with a shaking hand or blurred eye. Whilst wine, fruit, and spices were handed round the high tables, the squires had been served in turn at the farther end of the hall. Meanwhile, round the king there had gathered a group of statesmen and soldiers, talking eagerly among themselves. The Earl of Stafford, the Earl of Warwick, the Earl of Arundel, Lord Beauchamp, and Lord Neville were assembled at the back of his chair, with Lord Percy and Lord Mowbray at either side. The little group blazed with golden chains and jewelled chaplets, flame-coloured poltarks and purple tunics. Of a sudden the king said something over his shoulder to Sir William de Pirkington the herald, who advanced and stood by the royal chair. He was a tall and noble-featured man, with long grizzled beard which rippled down to the gold-linked belt girdling his many-coloured tabard. On his head he had placed a heraldic barret cap which bespoke his dignity, and he slowly raised his white one high in the air, while a great hush fell upon the whole. "My lords of England," said he, "knight bannerets, knights, squires, and all others here present of gentle birth and coat armour, know that your dread and sovereign lord, Edward, King of England and of France, bids me give you greeting and commands you to come hither that he may have speech with you." In an instant the tables were deserted, and the whole company had clustered in front of the king's chair. Those who had sat on either side of him crowded inward so that his tall dark figure upreared itself amid the dense circle of his guests. With a flush upon his olive cheeks and with pride smouldering in his dark eyes, He looked round him at the eager faces of the men who had been his comrades from Sluys and Cadsan to Cressy and Calais. They caught fire from that warlike gleam in his masterful gaze, and a sudden wild, fierce shout pealed up to the vaulted ceiling, a soldierly thanks for what was past and a promise for what was to come. The king's teeth gleamed in a quick smile, and his large white hand played with the jeweled dagger in his belt. "By the splendor of God," said he in a loud, clear voice, "I have little doubt that you will rejoice with me this night, for such tidings have come to my ears as may well bring joy to every one of you. You know well that our ships have suffered great scathe from the Spaniards, who for many years have slain without grace or ruth all of my people who have fallen into their cruel hands. Of late they have sent their ships into Flanders, and 30 great cogs and galleys lie now at Sluys well filled with archers and men-at-arms and ready in all ways for battle." A second shout, far louder and fiercer than the first, came like a thunderclap after the king's words. It was the bay of a fierce pack to their trusted huntsman. A dozen hands went up into the air, but the king turned to the Earl of Suffolk at his elbow. "You have fought them, Thomas," said he. "Yes, sire. I was in the great sea fight 8 years ago at the island of Guernsey, when Lord Louis of Spain held the sea against the Earl of Pembroke." "How found you them, Thomas?" "Very excellent people, sire, and no man could ask better. On every ship they have 100 crossbowmen of Genoa, the best in the world, and their spearmen also are very hardy men. They would throw great cantles of iron from the tops of the masts, and many of our people met their death through it. If we can bar their way in the narrow sea, then there will be much hope of honor for all of us." "I thank you, my fair and sweet father," said the prince, with joy flushing his handsome boyish face. Chandos stooped and kissed the king's hand. "My squire?" he asked. "Sir Robert," he said, "though you are young in years, you are already old in war, and I have heard that you are as prudent in council as you are valiant in the field. To you I commit the charge of this venture to Brittany in place of Sir John Chandos, who will follow thither when our work has been done upon the waters. 3 ships lie in Calais port, and 300 men are ready to your hand. Sir John will tell you what our mind is in the matter. And now, my friends and good comrades, you will haste you each to his own quarters, and you will make swiftly such preparations as are needful, for, as God is my aid, I will sail with you to win Chelsea tomorrow." Beckoning to Chandos, Manny, and a few of his chosen leaders, the king led them away to an inner chamber, where they might discuss the plans for the future. At the same time the assembly broke up, the knights in silence and dignity, the squires in mirth and noise, but all joyful at heart for the thought of the great days which lay before them. Day had not yet dawned when Nigel was in the chamber of Chandos preparing him for his departure and listening to the last cheery words of advice and direction from his noble master. That same morning, before the sun was halfway up to heaven, the king's great Nephilipa, bearing within it the most of those present at his banquet the night before, set its huge sail, adorned with the lions and the lilies, and turned its brazen beak for England. Behind it went 5 smaller cogs crammed with squires, archers, and men-at-arms. Nigel and his companions lined the ramparts of the castle and waved their caps as a bluff, burly vessels, with drums beating and trumpets clanging, 100 knightly pennons streaming from their decks, and the Red Cross of England over all, rolled slowly out to the open sea. Then when they had watched them until they were hull down, they turned, with hearts heavy at being left behind, to make ready for their own more distant venture. It took them 4 days of hard work ere their preparations were complete, for many were the needs of a small force sailing to a strange country. 3 ships had been left to them, the Cog Thomas of Romney, the Grace Dieu of Hythe, and the Basilisk of Southampton, into each of which 100 men were stowed, besides the 30 seamen who formed the crew. In the hold were 40 horses, amongst them Pommers, much wearied by his long idleness, and homesick for the slopes of Surrey where his great limbs might find the work he craved. The seamen of the Basilisk, being from a free port, had the old feud against the men of the Cinque Ports, who were looked upon by the other mariners of England as being unduly favoured by the king. A ship of the West Country could scarce meet with one from the narrow seas without blood flowing. Hence sprang sudden broils on the quay side, when with yell and blow the Thomases and Grace Dayus, Saint Leonard on their lips and murder in their hearts, would fall upon the basilisks. Then amid the whirl of cudgels and the clash of knives would spring the tiger figure of the young leader, lashing mercilessly to right and left like a tamer among his wolves, until he had beaten them howling back to their work. Upon the morning of the fourth day all was ready, and the ropes being cast off the 3 little ships were warped down the harbor by their own pinnaces until they were swallowed up in the swirling folds of a channel mist. Though small in numbers, it was no mean force which Edward had dispatched to succor the hard-pressed English garrisons in Brittany. There was scarce a man among them who was not an old soldier, and their leaders were men of note in council and in war. Noel flew his flag of the Black Raven aboard the Basilisk. With him were Nigel and his own squire John Hawthorne. Of his 100 men, 40 were Yorkshire dalesmen and 40 were men of Lincoln, all noted archers, with old Wood of Carlisle, a grizzled veteran of border warfare, to lead them. Already Aylward, by his skill and strength, had won his way to an under-officership amongst them, and shared with Long Ned Whittington, a huge North countryman, the reputation of coming next to fame as what Carlisle in all that makes an archer. The men-at-arms, too, were war-hardened soldiers, with Black Simon of Norwich, the same who had sailed from Winchelsea, to lead them. With his heart filled with hatred for the French who had slain all who were dear to him, he followed like a bloodhound over land and sea to any spot where he might glut his vengeance. Such also were the men who sailed in the other ships, Cheshire men from the Welsh borders in the Cog Thomas, and Cumberland men, used to Scottish warfare, in the Grace Dieu. Sir James Astley hung his shield of cinquefoil ermine over the quarter of the Thomas. Lord Thomas Percy, a cadet of Alnwick, famous already for the high spirit of that house, which for ages was a bar upon the landward gate of England, showed his blue lion rampant as leader of the Grace Dieu. Such was the goodly company St. Malo bound, who warped from Calais harbour to plunge into the thick reek of a channel mist. A slight breeze blew from the eastward, and the high-ended, round-bodied craft rolled slowly down the channel. The mist rose a little at times, so that they had sight of each other dipping and rising upon a sleek, oily sea. But again it would sink down, settling over the top, shrouding the great yard, and finally frothing over the deck until even the water alongside had vanished from their view, and they were afloat on a little raft in an ocean of vapor. A thin cold rain was falling, and the archers were crowded under the shelter of the overhanging poop and forecastle, where some spent the hours at dice, some in sleep, and many in trimming their arrows or polishing their weapons. At the farther end, seated on a barrel as a throne of honor, with trays and boxes of feathers around him, was Bartholomew the Bowyer and Fletcher, a fat, bald-headed man, whose task it was to see that every man's tackle was as it should be, and who had the privilege of selling such extras as they might need. A group of archers with their staves and quivers filed before him with complaints or requests, while half a dozen of the seniors gathered at his back and listened with grinning faces to his comments and rebukes. The youth with an effort did so, but he was too slow in disengaging his fingers, and the strings sliding down with a snap from the upper knock-court and pinched them sorely against the stave. A roar of laughter, like the clap of a wave, swept down the deck as the luckless bowman danced and wrung his hand. "So the shaft flies straight, I care not of the feather," said the bowman, a tall young Yorkshireman, counting out pennies on the palm of his horny hand. A score of rough voices joined at once in the quarrel, some upholding the bowyer and others taking the part of the North countryman. A red-headed dalesman snatched up a sword, but was felled by a blow from the fist of his neighbor. Instantly, with a buzz like a swarm of angry hornets, the bowmen were out on the deck, but ere a blow was struck, Knowles was amongst them with granite face and eyes afire. "Stand apart, I say. I will warrant you enough fighting to cool your blood ere you see England once more." Loring, "Hawthorne, cut any man down who raises his hand. Have you aught to say, you fox-haired rascal?" He thrust his face within 2 inches of that of the red man who had first seized his sword. The fellow shrank back, cowed, from his fierce eyes. "Now stint your noise, all of you, and stretch your long ease. Trumpeter, blow once more." A bugle call had been sounded every quarter of an hour so as to keep in touch with the other 2 vessels who were invisible in the fog. Now the high, clear note rang out once more, the call of a fierce sea creature to its mates, but no answer came back from the thick wall which pent them in. Again and again they called, and again with bated breath they waited for an answer. "My name is Nat Dennis, fair sir," said the gray-bearded old seaman. "It is 30 years since first I showed my cartel and blue trumpet for crew at the Watergate of Southampton. If any man may call himself master mariner, it is surely I. Where are our 2 ships? Nay, sir, who can say in this fog? Fellow, it was your place to hold them together. I have but the eyes God gave me, fair sir, and they cannot see through a cloud. Had it been fey, I, who am a soldier, could have kept them in company. Since it was foul, we look to you, who are called a mariner, to do so. You have not done it. You have lost 2 of my ships ere the venture's begun. Nay, fair sir, I pray you to consider." Nigel was leaning against the bulwarks, his thoughts away in the dingle at Cosford and out on the heather-clad slopes of Hindhead, when something struck his ear. It was a thin, clear clang of metal, pealing out high above the dull murmur of the sea, the creak of the boom and the flap of the sail. He listened, and again it was borne to his ear. The old shipman shook his head and crossed himself. "The Spaniards," cried a dozen bowmen and sailors. "There were 30 ships at the least," said Knowles, with a moody brow. "If we have seen them, I trow that they have also seen us. They will lay us aboard. Nay, fair sir, it is in my mind that our ship is lighter and faster than theirs. If the fog hold another hour, we should be through them." In another instant the starboard oars of the galley had been shipped, the sides of the 2 vessels grated together, and a stream of swarthy, red-capped Spaniards were swarming up the sides of the Basilisk and dropped with yells of triumph upon her deck. The center of the ship was held by the Spaniards, and having slain all who stood before them, they were pressing up to either end before they were made to understand that it was no fat sheep but a most fierce old wolf which they had taken by the ears. It was but a floating coffin piled with dead and dying men, which wallowed in the waves behind them as a basilisk lurched onward and left her in the fog. In their first rush onto the basilisk, the Spaniards had seized 6 of the crew and 4 unarmed archers. Their throats had been cut and their bodies tossed overboard. Now the Spaniards who littered the deck, wounded and dead, were thrust over the side in the same fashion. One ran down into the hold and had to be hunted and killed squealing under the blows like a rat in the darkness. Within half an hour no sign was left of this grim meeting in the fog save for the crimson splashes upon bulwarks and deck. The archers, flushed and merry, were unstringing their bows once more, for in spite of the water glue the damp it took the strength from the cords. Some were hunting about for arrows which might have stuck inboard, and some tying up small injuries received in the scuffle. But an anxious shadow still lingered upon the face of Sir Robert, and he peered fixedly about him through the fog. "It is none too soon," said the old shipman, pointing to a yellowish tint in the haze above them. "See yonder. It is the sun which wins through. It will be here anon." "Ah, said I not so?" A sickly sun, no large and far dimmer than the moon, had indeed shown its face, with cloud wreaths smoking across it. As they looked up, it waxed larger and brighter before their eyes. A yellow halo spread round it, one ray broke through, and then a funnel of golden light poured down upon them, widening swiftly at the base. A minute later they were sailing on a clear blue sea with an azure cloud-flecked sky above their heads, and such a scene beneath it as each of them would carry in his memory while memory remained. King Edward had been lying all day in his great ship, the Philippa, a mile out from the Canberra sands, waiting for the coming of the Spaniards. Above the huge sail which bore the royal arms flew the Red Cross of England. Along the bulwarks were shown the shields of 40 knights, the flower of English chivalry, and as many pennons floated from the deck. The high ends of the ship glittered with the weapons of the men-at-arms, and the waist was crammed with the archers. From time to time a crash of nakers and blare of trumpets burst from the royal ship, and was answered by a great neighbours, the lion on which the Black Prince flew his flag, the Christopher with the Earl of Suffolk, the Sal du Roy of Robert of Namur, and the Grace Marie of Sir Thomas Holland. Farther off lay the White Swan, bearing the arms of Mowbray, the Palmer of Deal, flying the Black Head of Audley, and the Kentish men under the Lord Beauchamp. The rest lay, anchored but ready, at the mouth of Winchelsea Creek. The king sat upon a keg in the fore part of his ship, with little John of Richmond, who was no more than a schoolboy, perched upon his knee. Edward was clad in the black velvet jacket, which was his favorite garb, and wore a small brown beaver hat with a white plume at the side. A rich cloak of fur turned up, with minerva droop from his shoulders. Behind him were a score of his knights, brilliant in silks and sarcenets, some seated on an upturned boat, and some swinging their legs from a bulwark. "Surely they are the Spaniards," said the king. "But I could hazard a guess," cried Chandos. "Surely they are the 3 ships with my own men on their way to Brittany." "You have hit it, John," said the king. "But look, I pray you, what in the name of the Virgin is that?" For brilliant stars of flashing light had shone out from different points of the cloud bank. The next instant, as many tall ships had swooped forth into the sunshine, a fierce shout rang from the king's ship, and was taken up all down the line, until the whole coast from Dungeness to Winchelsea echoed the warlike greeting. The king sprang up with a joyous face. "The game is afoot, my friends," said he. "Dress, John. Dress, Walter. Quick all of you. Squires, bring the harness. Let each tend to himself, for the time is short." A strange sight it was to see these 40 nobles tearing off their clothes and littering the deck with velvets and satins, Miles the squire of each, as busy as an ostler before a race, stooped and pulled and strained and riveted, fastening the bassinets, the leg pieces, the front and the back plates, until the silken courtier had become the man of steel. When their work was finished, there stood a stern group of warriors where the light dandies had sung and jested round Sir John's guitar. Below, in orderly silence, the archers were mustering under their officers and taking their allotted stations. A dozen had swarmed up to their hazardous post in the little tower in the tops. "Bring wine, Nicholas," cried the king. "Gentlemen, ere you close your visors, I pray you to take a last rouse with me. You will be dry enough, I promise you, before your lips are free once more. To what shall we drink, John?" "To the men of Spain," said Chandos, his sharp face peering like a gaunt bird through the gap in his helmet. "May their hearts be stout and their spirits high this day." "Well said, John," cried the king, and the knights laughed joyously as they drank. "Now, fair sirs, let each to his post. I am warden here on the forecastle. Do you, John, take charge of the afterguard. Walter, James, William, Fitzellen, Goldesborough, Reginald, you will stay with me. John, you may pick whom you will, and the others will bide with the archers. Now bear straight at the center, master shipman. Ere yonder sun sets, we will bring a red ship back as a gift to our ladies, or never look upon a lady's face again." The art of sailing into a wind had not yet been invented, nor was there any fore and aft canvas, save for small headsails with which a vessel could be turned. Hence the English fleet had to take a long slant-down channel to meet their enemies, but as the Spaniards coming before the wind were equally anxious to engage, there was a less delay. With stately pomp and dignity, the 2 great fleets approached. It chanced that one fine carrack had outstripped its consorts and came sweeping along, all red and gold, with a fringe of twinkling steel, a good half-mile before the fleet. Edward looked at her with a kindling eye, for indeed she was a noble sight with the blue water creaming under her gilded prow. "This is a most worthy and debonair vessel, Master Bunce," said he to the shipman beside him. "I would fain have a tilt with her. I pray you to hold her straight that we may bear her down." "If I hold her straight, then one or other must sink, and it may be both," the seaman answered. "I doubt not that with the help of Our Lady we shall do our part," said the king. "Hold her straight, master shipman, as I have told you." Now the 2 vessels were within arrow flight, and the bolts from the crossbowmen pattered upon the English ship. These short, thick devil's darts were everywhere humming like great wasps through the air, crashing against the bulwarks, beating upon the deck, ringing loudly on the armor of the knights, or with a soft, muffled thud sinking to the socket in a victim. The bowmen along either side of the Philippa had stood motionless waiting for their orders, but now there was a sharp shout from their leader, and every string twanged together. The air was full of their harping, together with the swish of the arrows, the long-drawn keening of the bowmen, and the short, deep bark of the under-officers. Steady, steady, loose steady. Shoot wholly together. 12 score paces. 10 score. Now 8. Shoot wholly together. Their gruff shouts broke through the high, shrill cry like the deep roar of a wave through the howl of the wind. As the two great ships hurtled together, the Spaniard turned away a few points so that the blow should be a glancing one. None the less it was terrific. A dozen men in the tops of the carrack were balancing a huge stone with the intention of dropping it over on the English deck. With a scream of horror, they saw the mast cracking beneath them. Over it went, slowly at first, then faster, until with a crash it came down on its side, sending them flying like stones from a sling far out into the sea. A swath of crushed bodies lay across the deck where the mast had fallen. But the English ship had not escaped unscathed. Her mast held, it is true, but the mighty shock not only stretched every man flat upon the deck, but had shaken a score of those who lined her sides into the sea. One bowman was hurled from the top, and his body fell with a dreadful crash at the very side of the prostrate king upon the forecastle. Many were thrown down with broken arms and legs from the high castles at either end into the waist of the ship. Worst of all, the seams had been opened by the crash, and the water was gushing in a dozen places. "Grapple my ship with that," he cried, pointing to the crippled Spaniard, "for I would have possession of her." But already the breeze had carried them past it, and a dozen Spanish ships were bearing down full upon them. "We cannot win back to her, lest we show our flank to these others," said the shipman. They, no less eager, grappled the Philippa both fore and aft, and the two vessels, linked tightly together, surged slowly over the long blue rollers. Over their bulwarks hung a cloud of men locked together in a desperate struggle, sometimes surging forward onto the deck of the Spaniard, sometimes recoiling back onto the king's ship, reeling this way and that, with the swords flickering like silver flames above them, while the long-drawn cry of rage and agony swelled up like a wolf's howl to the calm blue heaven above them. The prince, clad in the dark armor which gave him his name, was directing the attack from the poop when the shipman rushed wildly up to him with fear on his face. By a desperate scramble, a dozen men, the prince at their head, gained a footing on the edge of the Spaniard's deck. Some slashed furiously to clear a space. Others hung over, clutching the rail with one hand and pulling up their comrades from below. Every instant that they could hold their own, their strength increased, till 20 had become 30 and 30-40, when of a sudden the newcomers, still reaching forth to their comrades below, saw the deck beneath them reel and vanish in a swirling sheet of foam. The prince's ship had foundered. The prince had pulled up his visor and lowered his beaver. He smiled proudly as he gazed around him and wiped his streaming face. "Where's the shipman?" he asked. "Let him lead us against another ship." "Nay, sire, the shipman and all his men have sunk in the Lion," said Thomas de Mohun, a young knight of the West Country, who carried the standard. "We have lost our ship and the half of our following. I fear that we can fight no more." "It matters the less since the day is already ours," said the prince, looking over the sea. "My noble father's royal banner flies upon yonder Spaniard. Mowbray, Audley, Suffolk, Beauchamp, Namur, Tracy, Stafford, Arundel, each has his flag over a scarlet carrack, even as mine floats over this. See, yonder squadron is already far beyond our reach. But surely we owe thanks to you who came at so perilous a moment to our aid. Your face I have seen, and your coat armor also, young sir, though I cannot lay my tongue to your name. Let me know that I may thank you." He had turned to Nigel, who stood flushed and joyous at the head of the boarders from a basilisk. "I am but a squire, sire, and can claim no thanks, for there is nothing that I have done. Here is our leader." The prince's eyes fell upon the shield charged with the black raven and the stern young face of him who bore it. "Sir Robert Knowles," said he, "I had thought you were on your way to Brittany." "I was so, sire, when I had the fortune to see this battle as I passed." But Robert Knowles shook his head. "I have your father's command," Sire, and without his order I may not go against it. Our people are hard-pressed in Brittany, and it is not for me to linger on the way. I pray you, sire, if you must needs mention me to the king, to crave his pardon that I should have broken my journey thus." The sun lay low on the water, and its level beams glowed upon the scarlet and gold of 14 great carracks, each flying the cross of St. George, and towering high above the cluster of English ships which, with brave waving of flags and blaring of music, were moving slowly towards the Kentish coast. For a day and a half the small fleet made good progress, but on the second morning, after sighting Cape de la Hague, there came a brisk land wind which blew them out to sea. It grew into a squall with rain and fog, so that they were 2 more days beating back. Next morning they found themselves in a dangerous rock-studded sea with a small island upon their starboard quarter. It was girdled with high granite cliffs of a reddish hue, and slopes of bright green grassland lay above them. A second smaller island lay beside it. Dennis the shipman shook his head as he looked. "That is Bressieux," said he, "and the larger one is the island of Sark. If ever I be castaway, I pray the saints that I may not be upon yonder coast." Knowles gazed across at it. "You say well, master shipman," said he. "It does appear to be a rocky and perilous spot." "Who then are these people, and how do they live upon so small and windswept an island?" asked the soldier. "How now, fellow," asked Knowles, "what is this I hear? Is it indeed sooth that you have been a captive upon this island?" "It is true, fair sir. For 8 months I have been servant to the man whom they call their king. His name is La Muette, and he comes from Jersey, nor is there under God's sky a man whom I have more desire to see." "Has he then mishandled you?" Black Simon gave a wry smile and pulled off his jerkin. His lean, sinewy back was whaled and puckered with white scars. "He has left his sign of hand upon me," said he. "He swore that he would break me to his will, and thus he tried to do it. But most I desire to see him because he has lost a wager to me, and I would fain be paid." "It is but a small matter," Simon answered, "but I am a poor man, and the payment would be welcome. Should it have chanced that we stopped at this island, I should have craved your leave that I go ashore and ask for that which I have fairly won." Knowles thought a while. "It is much that you ask," said he, "for by God's truth I reckon that you and this friend of yours are 2 of my men whom I will be least ready to lose. I have seen you both at grips with the Spaniards, and I know you. But I trust you, and if we must indeed stop at this accursed place, then you may do as you will. If you have deceived me, or if this is a trick by which you design to leave me, then God be your friend when next we meet, for man will be of small avail." It proved that not only the seams had to be caulked, but that the cog Thomas was out of fresh water. The ships moored therefore near the Isle of Bressieux, where springs were to be found. There were no people upon this little patch, but over on the farther island many figures could be seen watching them, and the twinkle of steel from among them showed that they were armed men. One boat had ventured forth and taken a good look at them, but had hurried back with the warning that they were too strong to be touched. Black Simon found Aylward seated under the poop with his back against Bartholomew the bowyer. He was whistling merrily as he carved a girl's face upon the horn of his bow. "My friend," said Simon, "will you come ashore tonight, for I have need of your help?" Aylward crowed lustily. "Will I come, Simon? By my hilt, I shall be right glad to put my foot on the good brown earth once more. All my life I have trod it, and yet I would never have learned its worth had I not journeyed in these cursed ships. We will go on shore together, Simon, and we will seek out the women, if there be any there, for it seems a long year since I heard their gentle voices, and my eyes are weary of such faces as Bartholomew's or thine." Simon's grim features relaxed into a smile. "The only face that you will see ashore, Samkin, will bring you small comfort," said he, "and I warn you that this is no easy errand, but one which may be neither sweet nor fay, for if these people take us our end will be a cruel one." "By my hilt," said Aylward, "I am with you, gossip, wherever you may go. Say no more, therefore, for I am weary of living like a cunny in a hole, and I shall be right glad to stand by you in your venture." That night, 2 hours after dark, a small boat put forth from a basilisk. It contained Simon, Aylward, and 2 seamen. The soldiers carried their swords, and Black Simon bore a brown biscuit bag over his shoulder. Under his direction, the rowers skirted the dangerous surf, which beat against the cliffs until it came to a spot where an outlying reef formed a breakwater. Within was a belt of calm water and a shallow cover with a sloping beach. Here the boat was dragged up, and the seamen were ordered to wait, while Simon and Aylward started on their errand. With the assured air of a man who knows exactly where he is and whither he is going, the men-at-arms began to clamber up a narrow fern-lined cleft among the rocks. It was no easy ascent in the darkness, but Simon climbed on like an old dog hot upon a scent, and the panting Aylward struggled after as best he might. At last they were at the summit, and the archer threw himself down upon the grass. "Such a friend," Simon answered, "that I have often dreamed of our next meeting. Now before that moon has set it will have come." A fierce burst of laughter came out of the darkness, followed by a long cry of pain. "As like as not some poor devil has fallen into their clutches, even as I did. Come this way, Samkin, for there's a peat cutting where we may hide. Aye, here it is, but deeper and broader than of old. Now follow me close, for if we keep within it we shall find ourselves a stone cast off the king's house." "I have no wine to spare, but I will give you a keg of apples," said the other. "I had it out of the Peter and Paul, the Falmouth boat that struck in Crow Bay." They shuffled onward in the darkness. "Nay, Sir Robert will not waste time or strength ere he reach Brittany. Sure I am that if my little master Squire Loring had the handling of it, every woman on this island would be free ere another day had passed." "Simon," said Aylward, "the light is not over good and the place is cramped for swordplay, but if you will step out into the open I will teach you whether my master is a true soldier or not." Hour after hour they crouched in the peat cutting, listening to the noisy songs of the revelers within, some French, some English, and all growing foul and less articulate as the night wore on. Once a quarrel broke out, and the clamor was like a cage full of wild beasts at feeding time. Then a health was drunk, and there was much stamping and cheering. "Now, Samkin, now!" cried Simon, and jumping out from the hiding place he made for the door. It had not yet been fastened. The two comrades sprang inside. Then Simon drew the bolts so that none might interrupt them. A long table littered with flagons and beakers lay before them. It was lit up by a line of torches, which flickered and smoked in their iron sconces. At the farther end the solitary man was seated. His head rested upon his two hands, as if he were befuddled with wine, but at the harsh sound of the snapping bolts he raised his face and looked angrily around him. It was a strange, powerful head, tawny and shaggy like a lion's, with a tangled beard and a large, harsh face, bloated and blotched with vice. He laughed as the newcomers entered, thinking that two of his boon companions had returned to finish a flagon. Then he stayed hard and he passed his hand over his eyes like one who thinks he may be dreaming. Simon approached up one side of the table and Aylward up the other. When they were close to the king, the man-at-arms plucked a torch from its socket and held it to his own face. The king staggered back with a cry, as he gazed at that grim visage. "Le diable noir!" he cried. "Simon, the Englishman, what make you here?" "Nay, my friend, I have lived too long in your house not to know the ways of it. No manservant ever slept beneath your roof, for you feared lest your throat will be cut in the night time. You may shout and shout, if it so please you. It chanced that I was passing on my way from England in those ships which lie off La Brechou, and I thought I would come in and have speech with you." "Indeed, Simon, I am right glad to see you," said the king, cringing away from the fierce eyes of the soldier. "We were good friends in the past, were we not? And I cannot call to mind that I have ever done you injury. When you made your way to England by swimming to the Levantine, there was none more glad in heart than I. If I cared to doff my doublet, I could show you the marks of what your friendship has done for me in the past," said Simon. "It is printed on my back as clearly as on my memory. Why, you foul dog, there are the very rings upon the wall to which my hands were fastened, and there are the stains upon the boards on which my blood has dripped. Is it not so, you king of butchers?" The pirate chief turned whiter still. It may be that life here was somewhat rough, Simon, but if I have wronged you in any way, I will surely make amends. What do you ask? I ask only one thing, and I have come hither that I may get it. It is that you pay me forfeit for that you have lost your wager. My wager, Simon, I call to mind no wager. His long, heavy sword flew from its sheath. The king, with a howl of despair, flung his arms round him, and they rolled together under the table. Aylward sat with a ghastly face, and his toes curled with horror at the sight, for he was still new to scenes of strife, and his blood was too cold for such a deed. When Simon rose, he tossed something into his bag and sheathed his bloody sword. "Come, Samkin, our work is well done," said he. "By my hilt, if I had known what it was, I would have been less ready to come with you," said the archer. "Could you not have clapped a sword in his fist and let him take his chance in the hole?" "Nay, Samkin, if you had such memories as I, you would have wished that he should die like a sheep and not like a man. What chance did he give me when he had the power? And why should I treat him better? But, Holy Virgin, what have we here?" "Who shall say there is no God?" she cried. "Who shall say that prayer is unavailing? Great sir, brave sir, let me kiss a conquering hand." "Nay, nay, dame, stand back. Well, if you must needs have one of them, take this which is a clean one." "We must go, Aylward," said Simon. "In another hour the dawn will have broken. In daytime a rat could not cross this island and pass unseen. Come, man, and at once." But Aylward was at the woman's side. "Come with us, fair dame," said he. "Surely we can, at least, take you from this island, and no such change can be for the worse." Sir Robert Knowles was pacing the deck in the early morning when he heard the sound of oars, and there were his 2 night birds climbing up the side. "So, fellow," said he, "have you had speech with the King of Sark?" "Fair sir, I have seen him." "And he has paid his forfeit?" "He has paid it, sir." "The stake that he has lost?" For answer Simon opened his bag and shook it on the deck. Sir Robert turned away with a whistle. "For God," said he, "it is in my mind that I carry some hard men with me to Brittany." Chapter 19. How a Squire of England met a Squire of France. Sir Robert Knowles with his little fleet had sighted the Breton coast near Cancale. They had rounded the Point du Gruin, and finally had sailed past the port of St. Malo and down the long narrow estuary of the Rance until they were close to the old walled city of Dinan, which was held by that Montfort faction whose cause the English had espoused. Here the horses had been disembarked, the stores were unloaded, and the whole force encamped outside the city, whilst the leaders waited for news as to the present state of affairs and where there was most hope of honor and profit. The whole of France was feeling the effects of that war with England which had already lasted some 10 years, but no province was in so dreadful a condition as this unhappy land of Brittany. In Normandy or Picardy, the inroads of the English were periodical with intervals of rest between, but Brittany was torn asunder by constant civil war apart from the grapple of the 2 great combatants, so that there was no surcease of the sufferings. The struggle had begun in 1341 through the rival claims of Montfort and of Blois to the vacant dukedom. England had taken the part of Montfort, France that of Blois. Neither faction was strong enough to destroy the other, and so after 10 years of continual fighting, history recorded a long ineffectual list of surprises and ambushes, of raids and skirmishes, of towns taken and retaken, of alternate victory and defeat, in which neither party could claim a supremacy. It mattered nothing that Montfort and Blois had both disappeared from the scene, the one dead and the other taken by the English. Their wives caught up the swords which had dropped from the hands of their lords, and the long struggle went on even more savagely than before. In the south and east, the Blois faction held the country, and Nantes, the capital, was garrisoned and occupied by a strong French army. In the north and west, the Montfort party prevailed, for the island kingdom was at their back, and always fresh sails broke the northern skyline bearing adventurers from over the channel. Such was the land, full of darkness and blood, the saddest, blackest spot in Christendom, into which Knowles and his men were now advancing. With the great yellow horse curvetting beneath him, his Guildford armor gleaming in the sun, his sword clanking against his stirrup iron, and his father's tough ash spear in his hand. He rode with a light heart and a smiling face, looking eagerly to right and to left for any chance which his good fate might send. The newcomers soon had a chance of seeing to what lengths they would go, for in the roadway near to Colney's they came upon an English man-at-arms who had been waylaid and slain by them. How they had overcome him could not be told, but how they had slain him within his armor was horribly apparent, for they had carried such a rock as 8 men could lift, and had dropped it upon him as he lay, so that he was spread out in his shattered case like a crab beneath a stone. Many a fist was shaken at the distant woods, and many a curse hurled at those who haunted them, as the column of scowling soldiers passed the murdered man, whose badge of the Malene cross showed him to have been a follower of that house of Bentley, whose head, Sir Walter, was at that time leader of the British forces in the country. So for 3 days he moved slowly down the southern road. "You say truth, Thomas," cried Esley, a red-faced and choleric young man. "It is well certain that the French will not come to us, and surely it is the more needful that we go to them. In sooth, any soldier who sees us would smile that we should creep for 3 days along this road as though 1,000 dangers lay before us, when we are but poor broken peasants to deal with." A small troop of mounted bowmen had ridden out of an oak grove upon the left of the road. They trotted up to where the 3 knights had halted. 2 wretched peasants whose wrists had been tied to their leathers came laping and straining beside the horses in their effort not to be dragged off their feet. One was a tall, gaunt, yellow-haired man, the other short and swarthy, but both so crusted with dirt, so matted and tangled and ragged, that they were more like beasts of the wood than human beings. "What is this?" asked Knowles. "Have I not ordered you to leave the country folk at peace?" Sure enough, upon sword, girdle and dagger shone the silver Malene cross which had gleamed on the dead man's armor. Knowles looked at them and then at the prisoners with a face of stone. At the sight of those fell eyes they had dropped with inarticulate howls upon their knees, screaming out their protest in a tongue which none could understand. He pointed to a live oak by the roadside, and rode onward upon his way and conversed with his fellow knights. But the old bowman had ridden after him. "If it please you, Sir Robert, the bowmen would fain put these men to death in their own fashion," said he, "so that they die, I care not how." Knowles answered carelessly, and looked back no more. Human life was cheap in those stern days when the footman of a stricken army or the crew of a captured ship was slain without any question or thought of mercy by the victors. War was a rude game with death for the stake, and the forfeit was always claimed on the one side and paid on the other without doubt or hesitation. Only the knight might be spared, since his ransom made him worth more alive than dead. To men trained in such a school, with death forever hanging over their own heads, it may be well believed that the slaying of 2 peasant murderers was a small matter. And yet there was special reason why upon this occasion the bowmen wished to keep the deed in their own hands. Ever since their dispute aboard the Basilisk, there had been ill-feeling betwixt Bartholomew the old bald-headed bowyer and Long Ned Whittington the dalesman, which had ended in a conflict at Dinnan, in which not only they, but a dozen of their friends had been laid upon the cobblestones. The dispute raged round their respective knowledge and skill with the bow, and now some quick-wit amongst the soldiers had suggested a grim fashion in which it should be put to the proof, once for all, which could draw the surest shaft. A thick wood lay 200 paces from the road upon which the archers stood. A stretch of smooth grassy sward lay between. The 2 peasants were led out 50 yards from the road, with their faces toward the wood. There they stood, held on a leash, and casting many a wondering, frightened glance over their shoulders at the preparations which were being made behind them. Old Bartholomew and the big Yorkshireman had stepped out of the ranks and stood side by side, each with his strung bow in his left hand and a single arrow in his right. With care they had drawn on and greased their shooting gloves and fastened their braces. They plucked and cast up a few blades of grass to measure the wind, examined every small point of their tackle, turned their sides to the mark, and widened their feet in a firmer stance. From all sides came chaff and counsel from their comrades. "A 3/4 wind, bowyer," cried one. "Aim a body's breadth to the right." "Nay, this wind will scarce turn a well-drawn shaft," said a third. "Shoot dead upon him, and you will be clapped in the clout." "A week's pay on Bartholomew," shouted another. "Now, old fat pate, fail me not." The leashes were torn away, and the two men, stooping their heads, ran madly for the shelter of the wood amid such a howl from the archers as beaters may give when the hair starts from its form. The two bowmen, each with his arrow drawn to the pile, stood like russet statues, menacing, motionless, their eager eyes fixed upon the fugitives, their bow staves rising slowly as the distance between them lengthened. The Bretons were halfway to the wood, and still old Wat was silent. It may have been mercy or it may have been mischief, but at least the chase should have a fair chance of life. At 60 paces he turned his grizzled head at last. "Loose!" he cried. The Yorkshireman threw his bow-stave into the air and danced in triumph. Miles's comrades roared their fierce delight in a shout of applause, which changed suddenly into a tempest of hooting and of laughter. The smaller peasant, more cunning than his comrade, had run more slowly, but with many a backward glance. He had marked his companion's fate, and had waited with keen eyes until he saw the bowyer loose his string. At the moment he had thrown himself flat upon the grass and had heard the arrow scream above him, and seen it quiver in the turf beyond. Instantly he had sprung to his feet again, and amid wild whoops and halloos from the bowmen had made for the shelter of the wood. Now he had reached it, and 10 good paces separated him from the nearest of his persecutors. Surely they could not reach him here. With the tangled brushwood behind him, he was as safe as a rabbit at the mouth of his burrow. In the joy of his heart, he must needs dance in derision and snap his fingers at the foolish men who had let him slip. He threw back his head, howling at them like a dog, and at the instant an arrow struck him full in the throat and laid him dead among the bracken. There was a hush of surprised silence, and then a loud cheer burst from the archers. "By the rood of Beverley," cried old Wat, "I have not seen a finer roving shaft this many a year. In my own best day I could not have bettered it. Which of you loosed it?" It was Aylward of Tilford, Samkin Aylward, cried a score of voices, and the bowman, flushed at his own fame, was pushed to the front. "Indeed, I would that it had been at a nobler mark," said he. "He might have gone free for me, but I could not keep my fingers from the string when he turned to jeer at us." "I see well that you are indeed a master bowman," said old Wat, "and it is comfort to my soul to think that if I fall I leave such a man behind me to hold high the credit of our craft. Now gather your shafts and on, for Sir Robert awaits us on the brow of the hill." All day Knowles and his men marched through the same wild and deserted country, inhabited only by these furtive creatures, hares to the strong and wolves to the weak, who hovered in the shadows of the wood. Ever and anon upon the tops of the hills they caught a glimpse of horsemen who watched them from a distance and vanished when approached. Sometimes bells rang an alarm from villages amongst the hills, and twice they passed castles which drew up their drawbridges at their approach and lined their walls with hooting soldiers as they passed. The Englishmen gathered a few oxen and sheep from the pastures of each, but Knowles had no mind to break his strength upon stone walls, and so he went upon his way. Once at St. Mean they passed a great nunnery, girt with a high grey lichened wall, an oasis of peace in this desert of war, the black-robed nuns basking in the sun or working in the gardens, with a strong gentle hand of Holy Church shielding them ever from evil. The archers doffed caps to them as they passed, for the boldest and roughest dared not cross that line guarded by the dire ban and blight, which was the one only force in the whole still-ridden earth which could stand betwixt the weakling and the spoiler. The little army halted at St. Mean and cooked its midday meal. It had gathered into its ranks again and was about to start, when Knowles drew Nigel to one side. "Nigel," said he, "it seems to me that I have seldom set eyes upon a horse which had more power and promise of speed than this great beast of thine." "It is indeed a noble steed, fair sir," said Nigel. Betwixt him and his young leader there had sprung up great affection and respect since the day that they set foot in the basilisk. "It will be the better if you stretch his limbs, for he grows over heavy," said the knight. "Now mark me, Nigel. Yonder betwixt the ash tree and the red rock, what do you see on the side of the far hill?" "There is a white dot upon it. Surely it is a horse." Nigel had already sprung down and was tightening pommels girth. "Nay, there is no need of haste, for you cannot start until we are 2 miles upon our way. And above all I pray you, Nigel, none of your knight-errant ways. It is this roan that I want, him and the news that he can bring me. Think little of your own advancement, and much of the needs of the army. When you get him, ride westwards upon the sun, and you cannot fail to find the road. The round-eyed sister saw Yellow Horse and Twinkling Man sweep round the skirt of the wood, caught a last glimmer of him through the tree trunks, and paced slowly back to their pruning and their planting, their minds filled with the beauty and the terror of the outer world beyond the high grey lichen-mottled wall. So intent was he upon them that he gave no thought to his own safety, and it was only when the low thunder of the great horse's hoofs broke upon his ears that he turned in his saddle, looked very coolly and steadily at Nigel, then gave his own bridle a shake and darted off, swift as a hawk, toward the hills upon the left. Next instant its hind legs were high in the air, and the rider had been shot from its back. A howl of triumph rose from amidst the bushes, and a dozen wild figures armed with club and with spear rushed upon the prostrate man. Wow, anglais, wow, cried a voice, and Nigel saw the young rider stagger to his feet, strike round him with his sword, and then fall once more before the rush of his assailants. The foul crew had gone as swiftly and suddenly as it had come, and save for four-ragged figures littered amongst the trampled bushes, no sign remaining of their passing. Nigel tethered Pommers to a thorn bush and then turned his attention to the injured man. The white horse had regained his feet, and stood whinnying gently as he looked down on his prostrate master. A heavy blow, half broken by his sword, had beaten him down and left a great raw bruise upon his forehead. But a stream gurgled through the gorge, and a capful of water dashed over his face brought the senses back to the injured man. He was a mere stripling, with the delicate features of a woman, and a pair of great violet blue eyes which looked up presently with a puzzled stare into Nigel's face. I also am a squire by rank and the son of a knight. I am Raoul de la Roche-Pierre de Braz, whose father writes himself Lord of Grosbois, a free vavasor of the noble Count of Toulouse, with the right of Fosse and of Furca, the high justice, the middle and the low. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. Englishman, you have saved my life as I would have saved yours, had I seen such yelping dogs set upon a man of blood and of coat armor. But now I am yours, and what is your sweet will? When you are fit to ride, you will come back with me to my people. How, then, would you have ordered things? Asked Nigel, much taken with the frank and debonair manner of his captive. I would not have taken advantage of such a mischance as has befallen me which has put me in your power. I would give you a sword and beat you in fair fight, so that I might send you to give greeting to my dear lady and show her the deeds which I do for her fair sake. Surely, gentle Nigel, you could doff your armor. Then have I only my underclothes. Nay, there shall be no unfairness there, for I also will very gladly strip to my underclothes. Nigel looked wistfully at the Frenchman, but he shook his head. Alas, it may not be, said he. The last words that Sir Robert said to me were that I was to bring you to his side, for he would have speech with you, or that I could do what you ask, for I also have a fair lady to whom I would fain send you. What use are you to me, Raoul, since I have gained no honour in the taking of you? How is it with you now? The young Frenchman had risen to his feet. Do not take my sword, he said. I am yours, rescue or no rescue. I think now that I could mount my horse, though indeed my head still rings like a cracked bell. She is my love, answered the Frenchman. We are but waiting for the Count to be slain in the wars, and then we mean to marry. And this lady of thine, Nigel, I would that I could see her. Perchance you shall, fair sir, said Nigel, for all that I have seen of you fills me with desire to go further with you. It is in my mind that we might turn this thing to profit and to honour, for when Sir Robert has spoken with you, I am free to do with you as I will. And what will you do, Nigel? We shall surely try some small deed upon each other, so that either I shall see the Lady Beatrice, or you the Lady Mary. Nay, thank me not, for like yourself, I have come to this country in search of honour, and I know not where I may better find it than at the end of your sword point. My good lord and master, Sir John Chandos, has told me many times that never yet did he meet French knight nor squire that he did not find great pleasure and profit from their company, and now I very clearly see that he has spoken the truth. For an hour these two friends rode together, the Frenchman pouring forth the praises of his lady, whose glove he produced from one pocket, her garter from his vest, and a shoe from his saddle-bag. She was blonde, and when he heard that Mary was dark, he would fain stop then and there to fight the question of color. He talked, too, of his great chateau at Lauder, by the head waters of the pleasant Garonne, of the 100 horses in the stables, the 70 hounds in the kennels, the 50 hawks in the mews. His English friends should come there when the wars were over, and what golden days would be theirs. Nigel, too, with his English coldness thawing before this young sunbeam of the south, found himself talking of the heather slopes of Surrey, of the forests of Woolmer, even of the sacred chambers of Cosford. But as they rode onward towards the sinking sun, their thoughts far away in their distant homes, their horses striding together, there came that which brought their minds back in an instant to the perilous hillsides of Brittany. It was the long blast of a trumpet blown from somewhere on the farther side of a ridge toward which they were riding. A second long-drawn note from a distance answered it. "It is your camp?" said the Frenchman. "Nay," said Nigel. "We have pipes with us in an acre or two, but I have heard no trumpet call from our ranks. It behoves us to take heed, for we know not what may be before us. Ride this way, I pray you, that we may look over and yet be ourselves unseen." "The bloody head on a silver tray," cried the Frenchman. "Was I not warned against him? This is not a man, friend Nigel. It is a monster who wars upon English, French, and old Christendom. Have you not heard of the butcher of La Brohiniere?" "Nay, I have not heard of him. His name is accursed in France. Have I not been told also that he put to death this very year the Saint Paul, a friend of the English king? Yes, in very truth, it comes back to my mind now that I heard something of this matter in Calais before we started." But even as they watched, the trumpet call burst forth once more. It came not from the castle, but from the farther end of the valley. It was answered by a second call from the wolves. Then in a long, straggling line there came a wild troop of marauders streaming homeward from some foray. In the van, at the head of a body of spearmen, rode a tall and burly man, clad in brazen armor, so that he shone like a golden image in the slanting rays of the sun. His helmet had been loosened from his gorget, and was held before him on his horse's neck. A great tangled beard flowed over his breastplate, and his hair hung down as far behind. A squire at his elbow bore high the banner of the bleeding head. Behind the spearmen were a line of heavily laden mules, and on either side of them a drove of poor country folk, who were being herded into the castle. Lastly came a second strong troop of mounted spearmen, who conducted a score or more prisoners who marched together in a solid body. Nigel stayed at them, and then, springing on his horse, he urged it along the shelter of the ridge so as to reach unseen a spot which was close to the castle gate. He had scarce taken up his new position when the cavalcade reached the drawbridge, and amid yells of welcome from those upon the wall, filed in a thin line across it. Nigel stayed hard once more the prisoners in the rear, and so absorbed was he by the sight that he had passed the rocks and was standing she upon the summit. As he spoke, the hindmost one, a strongly built, broad-shouldered man, looked round and saw the gleaming figure above him upon the hill, with open helmet, and the 5 roses glowing upon his breast. With a sweep of his hands he had thrust his guardians aside, and for a moment was clear of the throng. "Squire Loring, Squire Loring," he cried, "it is I, Aylward the archer. It is I, Samkin Aylward." The next minute a dozen hands had seized him. His cries were muffled with a gag, and he was hurled, the last of the band, through the black and threatening archway of the gate. Then with a clang the 2 iron wings came together, the portcullis swung upward, and captives, robbers and booty were all swallowed up within the grim and silent fortress. For some minutes Nigel remained motionless upon the crest of the hill, his heart like lead within him, and his eyes fixed upon the huge grey walls which contained his unhappy henchmen. He was roused by a sympathetic hand upon his shoulder and the voice of his young prisoner in his ear. "Pest," said he. "They have some of your birds in their cage, have they not? What then, my friend? Keep your heart high. Is it not the chance of war, today to them, tomorrow to thee, and death at last for us all? and yet I had rather they were in any hands than those of Oliver the Butcher. By St. Paul, we cannot suffer it, cried Nigel distractedly. This man has come with me from my own home. He has stood between me and death before now. It goes to my very heart that he should call upon me in vain. I pray you, Raoul, to use your wits, for mine are all curdled in my head. Tell me what I should do and how I may bring him help. The Frenchman shrugged his shoulders. As easy to get a lamb unscathed out of a wolf's lair as a prisoner safe from La Brohinière. Nay, Nigel, whither do you go? Have you indeed taken leave of your wits? The squire had spurred his horse down the hillside, and never halted until he was within a bowshot of the gate. The French prisoner followed hard behind him, with a buzz of reproaches and expostulations. You are mad, Nigel, he cried. What do you hope to do then? Would you carry the castle with your own hands? Halt, man, halt, in the name of the Virgin. But Nigel had no plan in his head, and only obeyed the fevered impulse to do something to ease his thoughts. He paced his horse up and down, waving his spear, and shouting insults and challenges to the garrison. Over the high wall 100 jeering faces looked down upon him. So rash and wild was his action that it seemed to those within to mean some trap. So the drawbridge was still held high, and none ventured forth to seize him. A few long-range arrows pattered on the rocks, and then with a deep booming sound a huge stone, hurled from a mangonel, sang over the head of the two squires and crushed into splinters amongst the boulders behind them. The Frenchman seized Nigel's bridle and forced him farther from the gateway. By the dear Virgin, he cried, I care not to have those pebbles about my ears, yet I cannot go back alone. So it is very clear, my crazy comrade, that you must come also. Now we are beyond their reach. But see, my friend Nigel, who are those who crown the height? The sun had sunk behind the western ridge, but the glowing sky was fringed at its lower edge by a score of ruddy twinkling points. A body of horsemen showed hard and black upon the bare hill. Then they dipped down the slope into the valley. Miles a band of footmen followed behind. There, my people, cried Nigel joyously. Come, my friend, hasten, that we may take counsel what we shall do. Sir Robert Knowles rode a bowshot in front of his men, and his brow was as black as night. Beside him, with crestfallen face, his horse bleeding, his armor dinted and soiled, was the hot-headed knight, Sir James Estley. A fierce discussion raged between them. I have done my devoir as best I might, said Estley. Alone I had 10 of them at my sword point. I know not how I have lived to tell it. What is your devoir to me? Where are my 30 bowmen? Cried Knowles in bitter wrath. 10 lie dead upon the ground, and 20 are worse than dead in yonder castle. And all because you must needs show all men how bold you are, and ride into a bushment such as a child could see. Alas for my own folly that ever I should have trusted such a one as you with the handling of men. By God, Sir Robert, you shall answer to me for those words, cried Estley with a choking voice. Never has a man dared to speak to me as you have done this day. As long as I hold the king's order I shall be master, and by the Lord I will hang you, James, on a near tree if I have further cause of offence. How now, Nigel? I see by yonder white horse that you at least have not failed me. I will speak with you anon. Percy, bring up your men, and let us gather round this castle, for, as I hope for my soul's salvation, I would not leave it until I have my archers, or the head of him who holds them. That night the English lay thick round the fortress of La Brohinière, so that none might come forth from it. But if none could come forth, it was hard to see how any could win their way in, for it was full of men, the walls were high and strong, and a deep, dry ditch girt it round. But the hatred and fear which its master had raised over the whole countryside could now be plainly seen, for during the night the brushwood men and the villagers came in from all parts with offers of such help as they could give for the intaking of the castle. Knowles set them cutting bushes and tying them into faggots. When morning came, he rode out before the wall, and he held counsel with his knights and squires as to how he should enter in. By noon, said he, we shall have so many faggots that we may make our way over the ditch. Then we will beat in the gates and so win a footing. The young Frenchman had come with Nigel to the conference, and now, amid the silence which followed the leader's proposal, he asked if he might be heard. He was clad in the brazen armor which Nigel had taken from the Red Ferret. "It may be that it is not for me to join in your council," said he, "seeing that I am a prisoner and a Frenchman. But this man is the enemy of all, and we of France owe him a debt even as you do, since many a good Frenchman has died in his cellars. For this reason I crave to be heard." "We will hear you," said Knowles. "I have come from Evran yesterday," said he. "Sir Henry Spinifort, Sir Peter Larroy, and many other brave knights and squires lie there, with a good company of men, all of whom would very gladly join with you to destroy this butcher and his castle, for it is well known amongst us that his deeds are neither good nor fair. There are also bombards which we could drag over the hills, and so beat down this iron gate. If you so order it, I will ride to Evran and bring my companions back with me." "Indeed, Robert," said Percy, "it is in my mind that this Frenchman speaks very wisely and well." "And when we have taken the castle, what then?" asked Knowles. "Then you could go upon your way, fair sir, and we upon ours. Or if it please you better, you could draw together on yonder hill, and we on this one, so that the valley lies between us. Then if any cavalier wished to advance himself or to shed a vow and exalt his lady, an opening might be found for him. Surely it would be shame if so many brave men drew together, and no small deed would have come of it." Nigel clasped his captive's hand to show his admiration and esteem, but Knowles shook his head. "Things are not ordered thus, save in the tales of the minstrels," said he. "I have no wish that your people at Evran should know our numbers or our plans. I am not in this land for knight-errantry, but I am here to make head against the king's enemies. Has no one aught else to say?" Percy pointed to the small outlying fortalice upon the knoll, on which also flew the flag of the Bloody Head. "This smaller castle, Robert, is of no great strength and cannot hold more than 50 men. It is built, as I conceive it, that no one should seize a high ground and shoot down into the other. Why should we not turn all our strength upon it, since it is the weaker of the twain?" But again the young leader shook his head. "If I should take it," said he, "I am still no nearer to my desire, nor will it avail me in getting back my bowmen. It may cost a score of men, and what profit shall I have from it? Had I bombards, I might place them on yonder hill, but having none it is of little use to me." "It may be," said Nigel, "that they have scant food or water, and so must come forth to fight us." "I have made inquiry of the peasants," Knowles answered, "and they are of one mind that there is a well within the castle, and good store of food. Nay, gentlemen, there is no way before us save to take it by arms, and no spot where we can attempt it save through the great gate. Soon we will have so many faggots that we can cast them down into the ditch, and so win our way across. I have ordered them to cut a pine tree on the hill and shear the branches, so that we may beat down the gate with it. But what is now amiss, and why do they run forward to the castle?" A buzz had risen from the soldiers in the camp, and they all crowded in one direction, rushing toward the castle wall. The knights and squires rode after them, and when in view of the main gate, the cause of the disturbance lay before them. On the tower above the portal 3 men were standing in the garb of English archers, ropes round their necks and their hands bound behind them. Their comrades surged below them with cries of recognition and of pity. "It is Ambrose!" cried one. "Surely it is Ambrose of Ingleton." "Yes, in truth, I see his yellow hair." And the other, him with the beard, "It is Lockwood of Skipton. Alas for his wife who keeps the booth by the bridgehead of Ribble. I wot not who the third may be." "It is little Johnny Alspay, the youngest man in the company," cried old Wat, with the tears running down his cheeks. "'Twas I who brought him from his home. Alas, alas! Foul fare the day that ever I coaxed him from his mother's side that he might perish in a far land." There was a sudden flourish of a trumpet, and the drawbridge fell. Across it strode a portly man with a faded herald's coat. He halted warily upon the farther side, and his voice boomed like a drum. "I would speak with your leader," he cried. Knowles rode forward. "Have I your knightly word that I may advance unscathed with all courteous entreaty, as befits a herald?" Knowles nodded his head. The man came slowly and pompously forward. "I am the messenger and liege servant," said he, "of the High Baron, Oliver de Saint Yvon, Lord of La Brohiniere. He bids me to say that if you continue your journey and molest him no further, he will engage upon his part to make no further attack upon you. As to the men whom he holds, he will enroll them in his own honorable service, for he has need of longbowmen, and has heard much of their skill. But if you constrain him or cause him further displeasure by remaining before his castle, he hereby gives you warning that he will hang these 3 men over his gateway, and every morning another 3 until all have been slain. This he has sworn upon the rood of Calvary, and as he has said so he will do upon jeopardy of his soul. Robert Knowles looked grimly at the messenger. "You may thank the saints that you have had my promise," said he. "Else would I have stripped that lying tabard from my back and the skin beneath it from my bones, that thy master might have a fitting answer to his message. Tell him that I hold him and all that are within his castle as hostage for the lives of my men, and that should he dare to do them scathe, he and every man that is with him shall hang upon his battlements. Go, and go quickly, lest my patience fail." There was it in Knowles' cold grey eyes and in his manner of speaking those last words which sent the portly envoy back at a quicker gait than he had come. As he vanished into the gloomy arch of the gateway, the drawbridge swung up with creak and rattle behind him. A few minutes later, a rough-bearded fellow stepped out over the portal where the condemned archers stood, and seizing the first by the shoulders, he thrust him over the wall. A cry burst from the man's lips, and a deep groan from those of his comrades below as he fell with a jerk which sent him halfway up to the parapet again, and then after dancing like a child's toy swung slowly backward and forward with limp limbs and twisted neck. The hangman turned and bowed in mock reverence to the spectators beneath him. He had not yet learned in a land of puny archers how sure and how strong is the English bow. 6 men, old what amongst them, had run forward toward the wall. They were too late to save their comrades, but at least their deaths were speedily avenged. The man was in the act of pushing off the second prisoner when an arrow crashed through his head, and he fell stone dead upon the parapet. But even in falling, he had given the fatal thrust, and a second russet figure swung beside the first against the dark background of the castle wall. They only remained a young lad, Johnny Alspay, who stood shaking with fear, an abyss below him, and the voices of those who would hurl him over it behind. There was a long pause before anyone would come forth to dare those deadly arrows. Then a fellow, crouching double, ran forward from the shelter, keeping the young archer's body as a shield between him and danger. "Aside, John, aside," cried his comrades from below. The youth sprang as far as the rope would allow him, and slipped it half over his face in the effort. 3 arrows flashed past his side, and 2 of them buried themselves in the body of the man behind. A howl of delight burst from the spectators as he dropped first upon his knees and then upon his face. A life for a life was no bad bargain, but it was only a short respite which the skill of his comrades had given to the young archer. Over the parapet there appeared a bowl of brass, then a pair of great brazen shoulders, and lastly the full figure of an armored man. He walked to the edge, and they heard his hoarse guffaw of laughter as the arrows clanged and clattered against his impenetrable mail. He slapped his breastplate as he jeered at them. Well, he knew that at the distance no dart ever sped by mortal hands could cleave through his plates of metal. So he stood, the great burly butcher of La Brohiniere, with head uptossed, laughing insolently at his foes. Then with slow and ponderous tread he walked toward his boy victim, seized him by the ear, and dragged him across so that the rope might be straight. Seeing that the noose had slipped across the face, he tried to push it down, but the mail glove hampering him, he pulled it off and grasped the rope above the lad's head with his naked hand. Quick as a flash old Wat's arrow had sped, and the butcher sprang back with a howl of pain, his hand skewed by a cloth-yard shaft. As he shook it furiously at his enemies, a second grazed his knuckles. With a brutal kick of his metal-shod feet, he hurled young Alspay over the edge, looked down for a few moments at his death agonies, and then walked slowly from the parapet, nursing his dripping hand, the arrows still ringing loudly upon his back piece as he went. The archers below, enraged at the death of their comrades, leaped and howled like a pack of ravening wolves. "By St. Dunstan," said Percy, looking round at their flushed faces, "if ever we are to carry it, now is the moment, for these men will not be stopped if hate can take them forward." "You are right, Thomas," cried Knowles. "Gather together 20 men-at-arms, each with his shield to cover him. Esley, do you place the bowmen so that no head may show at window or parapet. Nigel, I pray you to order the country folk forward with their fardels of faggots. Let the others bring up the lopped pine tree which lies yonder behind the horse lines. 10 men-at-arms can bear it on the right, and 10 on the left, having shields over their heads. The gate once down, let every man rush in, and God help the better cause. Swiftly and yet quietly the dispositions were made, for these were old soldiers whose daily trade was war. In little groups the archers formed in front of each slit or crevice in the walls, whilst others scanned the battlements with wary eyes, and sped an arrow at every face which gleamed for an instant above them. The garrison shot forth a shower of crossbow bolts and an occasional stone from their engine, but so deadly was the hail which rained upon them that they had no time to dwell upon their aim, and their discharges were wild and harmless. Under cover of the shaft of the bowman a line of peasants ran unscathed to the edge of the ditch, each hurling in the bundle which he bore in his arms, and then hurrying back for another one. In 20 minutes a broad pathway of faggots lay level with the ground upon one side, and the gate upon the other. With the loss of 2 peasants slain by bolts and 1 archer crushed by a stone, the ditch had been filled up. All was ready for the battering ram. With a shout, 20 picked men rushed forward with a pine tree under their arms, the heavy end turned toward the gate. The arbalesters on the tower leaned over and shot into the midst of them, but could not stop their advance. 2 dropped, but the others, raising their shields, ran onward still shouting, crossed the bridge of faggots, and came with a thundering crash against the door. It splintered from base to arch, but kept its place. Swinging their mighty weapon, the storming party thudded and crashed upon the gate, every blow loosening and widening the cracks which rent it from end to end. The 3 knights, with Nigel, the Frenchman Raoul, and the other squires, stood beside the ram, cheering on the men, and chanting to the rhythm of the swing with a loud ha at every blow. A great stone loosened from the parapet roared through the air and struck Sir James Estley and another of the attackers, but Nigel and the Frenchman had taken their places in an instant, and the ram thudded and smashed with greater energy than ever. Another blow and another. The lower part was staving inward, but the great central bar still held firm. Surely another minute would beat it from its sockets. But suddenly from above there came a great deluge of liquid. A hogshead of it had been tilted from the battlement until soldiers, bridge, and ram were equally drenched in yellow slime. Knowles rubbed his gauntlet in it, held it to his visor, and smelled it. "Back! Back!" he cried. "Back before it is too late." There was a small barred window above their heads at the side of the gate. A ruddy glare shone through it, and then a blazing torch was tossed down upon them. In a moment the oil had caught, and the whole place was a sheet of flame. The fir tree that they carried, the faggots beneath them, their very weapons, were all in a blaze. To right and left the men sprang down into the dry ditch, rolling with screams upon the ground in their endeavor to extinguish the flames. The knights and squires, protected by their armor, strove hard, stamping and slapping, to help those who had but leather jacks to shield their bodies. From above a ceaseless shower of darts and of stones were poured down upon them, while on the other hand the archers, seeing the greatness of the danger, ran up to the edge of the ditch and shot fast and true at every face which showed above the wall. Scorched, wearied, and bedraggled, the remains of the storming party clambered out of the ditch as best they could, clutching at the friendly hands held down to them, and so limped their way back amid the taunts and howls of their enemies. A long pile of smouldering cinders was all that remained of their bridge, and on it lay Estley and 6 other red-hot men glowing in their armor. Knowles clenched his hands as he looked back at the ruin that was wrought, and then surveyed the group of men who stood or lay around him nursing their burned limbs and scowling up at the exultant figures who waved on the castle wall. Badly scorched himself, the young leader had no thought for his own injuries in the rage and grief which racked his soul. "We will build another bridge," he cried. "Set the peasants binding faggots once more." But a thought had flashed through Nigel's mind. "See, fair sir," said he, "the nails of yonder door are red-hot and the wood as white as ashes. Surely we can break our way through it." "By the Virgin, you speak truly," cried the French squire. "If we can cross the ditch, the gate will not stop us. Come, Nigel, for our fair ladies' sakes, I will race you who will reach it first, England or France. Alas for all the wise words of the good Chandos. Alas for all the lessons in order and discipline learned from the wary Knowles." In an instant, Forgetful of all things but this noble challenge, Nigel was running at the top of his speed for the burning gate. Close at his heels was the Frenchman, blowing and gasping, as he rushed along in his brazen armor. Behind came a stream of howling archers and men-at-arms, like a flood which has broken its dam. Down they slipped into the ditch, rushed across it, and clambered on each other's backs up the opposite side. Nigel, Raoul, and 2 archers gained a foothold in front of the burning gate at the same moment. With blows and kicks they burst it to pieces, and dashed with a yell of triumph through the dark archway beyond. For a moment they thought with mad rapture that the castle was carried. A dark tunnel lay before them, down which they rushed. But alas! At the farther end it was blocked by a second gateway as strong as that which had been burned. In vain they beat upon it with their swords and axes. On each side the tunnel was pierced with slits, and the crossbow bolts discharged at only a few yards' distance crashed through armor as if it were cloth and laid man after man upon the stones. They raged and leaped before the great iron-clamped barrier, but the wall itself was as easy to tear down. It was bitter to draw back, but it was madness to remain. Nigel looked round and saw that half his men were down. At the same moment Raoul sank with a gasp at his feet, a bolt driven to its socket through the links of the camail which guarded his neck. Some of the archers, seeing that certain death awaited them, were already running back to escape from a fatal passage. "By St. Paul," cried Nigel hotly, "would you leave our wounded where this butcher may lay his hands upon them? Let the archers shoot inwards and hold them back from the slits. Now let each man raise one of our comrades, lest we leave our honor in the gate of this castle." With a mighty effort he had raised Raoul upon his shoulders and staggered with him to the edge of the ditch. Several men were waiting below where the steep bank shielded them from the arrows, and to them Nigel handed down his wounded friend, and each archer in turn did the same. Again and again Nigel went back until no one lay in the tunnel save 7 who had died there. 13 wounded were laid in the shelter of the ditch, and there they must remain until night came to cover them. Meanwhile, the bowmen on the farther side protected them from attack, and also prevented the enemy from all attempts to build up the outer gate. The gaping, smoke-blackened arch was all that they could show for a loss of 30 men, but that at least Knowles was determined to keep. Burned and bruised, but unconscious of either pain or fatigue for the turmoil of his spirit within him, Nigel knelt by the Frenchman and loosened his helmet. The girlish face of the young squire was white as chalk, and the haze of death was gathering over his violet eyes, but a faint smile played round his lips as he looked up at his English comrade. "I shall never see Beatrice again," he whispered. "I pray you, Nigel, that when there is a truce you will journey as far as my father's chateau and tell him how his son died. Young Gaston will rejoice, for to him come the land and the coat, the war cry and the prophet. See them, Nigel, and tell them that I was as forward as the others. Indeed, Raoul, no man could have carried himself with more honor or won more worship than you have done this day. I will do your behest when the time comes." "Surely you are happy, Nigel," the dying squire murmured, "for this day has given you one more deed which you may lay at the feet of your lady love." "It might have been so had we carried the gate," Nigel answered sadly, "but by St. Paul, I cannot count it a deed where I have come back with my purpose unfulfilled. But this is no time, Raoul, to talk of my small affairs. If we take the castle and I bear a good part in it, then perchance all this may indeed avail." The Frenchman set up with that strange energy which comes often as the harbinger of death. "You will win your Lady Mary, Nigel, and your great deeds will be not 3 but a score, so that in all Christendom there shall be no man of blood and coat armor who has not heard your name and your fame. This I tell you, I, Raoul de la Roche-Pierre de Bras, dying upon the field of honor. And now kiss me, sweet friend, and lay me back, for the mist close round me and I am gone." With tender hands the squire lowered his comrade's head, but even as he did so there came a choking rush of blood, and the soul had passed. So died a gallant cavalier of France, and Nigel, as he knelt in the ditch beside him, prayed that his own end might be as noble and as debonair. Chapter 21. How the second messenger went to Cosford. Under cover of night the wounded men were lifted from the ditch and carried back, whilst pickets of archers were advanced to the very gate so that none should rebuild it. Nigel, sick at heart over his own failure, the death of his prisoner and his fears for Aylward, crept back into the camp. But his cup was not yet full, for Knowles was waiting for him with a tongue which cut like a whiplash. Who was he, a raw squire, that he should lead an attack without orders? See what his crazy knight-errantry had brought about. 20 men had been destroyed by it and nothing gained. Their blood was on his head. Chandos should hear of his conduct. He should be sent back to England when the castle had fallen. Such were the bitter words of Knowles. The more bitter because Nigel felt in his heart that he had indeed done wrong, and that Chandos would have said the same though, perchance, in kinder words. He listened in silent respect, as his duty was, and then having saluted his leader he withdrew apart, threw himself down amongst the bushes, and wept the hottest tears of his life, sobbing bitterly with his face between his hands. He had striven hard, and yet everything had gone wrong with him. He was bruised, burned, and aching from head to foot. Yet so high is the spirit above the body that all was nothing compared to the sorrow and shame which racked his soul. But a little thing changed the current of his thoughts and brought some peace to his mind. He had slipped off his mail gauntlets, and as he did so his fingers lighted upon the tiny bangle which Mary had fastened there when they stood together upon St. Catherine's Hill on the Guildford Road. He remembered the motto curiously worked in filigree of gold. It ran, Feis q dois, advene q pura, se commande eu chevalier. The words rang in his weary brain. He had done what seemed right, come what might. It had gone awry, it is true, but all things human may do that. If he had carried the castle, he felt that Knowles would have forgiven and forgotten all else. If he had not carried it, it was no fault of his. No man could have done more. If Mary could see, she would surely have approved. Dropping into sleep, he saw a dark face, shining with pride and with pity, stooping over him as he lay. She stretched out a hand in his dream and touched him on the shoulder. He sprang up and rubbed his eyes, for fact had woven itself in the dream in the strange way that it does, and someone was indeed leaning over him in the gloom and shaking him from his slumbers. But the gentle voice and soft touch of the Lady Mary had changed suddenly to the harsh accents and rough grip of Black Simon, the fierce Norfolk man-at-arms. Surely you are the Squire Loring, he said, peering close to his face in the darkness. I am he. What then? I have searched through the camp for you, but when I saw the great horse tethered near these bushes, I thought you would be found hard by. I would have a word with you. Speak on. This man, Aylward the bowman, was my friend, and it is the nature that God has given me to love my friends even as I hate my foes. He is also thy servant, and it has seemed to me that you love him also. I have good cause so to do. Then you and I, Squire Loring, have more reason to strive on his behalf than any of these others, who think more of taking the castle than of saving those who are captives within. Do you not see that such a man as this rebel lord would, when all else had failed him, most surely cut the throats of his prisoners at the last instant before the castle fell, knowing well that come what might he would have short shrift himself? Is it not certain? By St. Paul, I had not thought of it. I was with you, hammering at the inner gate, said Simon, and yet once when I thought that it was giving way I said in my heart, Goodbye, Samkin, I shall never see you more. This baron has gall in his soul, even as I have myself, and do you think that I would give up my prisoners alive, if I were constrained so to do? No, no. Had we won our way this day, it would have been the death stroke for them all. It may be that you are right, Simon, said Nigel, and the thought of it should assuage our grief. But if we cannot save them by taking the castle, then surely they are lost indeed. It may be so, or it may not, Simon answered slowly. It is in my mind that if the castle were taken very suddenly, and in such a fashion that I could not foresee it, then perchance we might get the prisoners before they could do them scathe. Nigel bent forward eagerly, his hand on the soldier's arm. You have some plan in your mind. Simon, tell me what it is. I had wished to tell Sir Robert, but he is preparing the assault for tomorrow and will not be turned from his purpose. I have indeed a plan, but whether it be good or not I cannot say until I have tried it. But first I will tell you what put it into my thoughts. Know then that this morning when I was in yonder ditch I marked one of their men upon the wall. He was a big man with a white face, red hay, and a touch of St. Anthony's fire upon the cheek. But what has this to do with Aylward? I will show you. This evening after the assault I chanced to walk with some of my fellows round yonder small fort upon the knoll to see if we could spy a weak spot in it. Some of them came to the wall to curse us, and among them whom should I see but a big man with a white face, red hay, and a touch of Anthony's fire upon his cheek? What make you of that, Squire Nigel? That this man had crossed from the castle to the fort. In good sooth, it must indeed be so. There are not two such ken-speckled men in the world. But if he crossed from the castle to the fort, it was not above the ground, for our own people were between. By St. Paul, I see your meaning, cried Nigel. It is in your mind that there is a passage under the earth from one to the other. I am well sure of it. Then if we should take the small fort, we may pass down this tunnel, and so carry the great castle also. Such a thing might happen, said Simon, and yet it is dangerous also, for surely those in the castle would hear our assault upon the fort, and so be warned about the passage against us, and to slay the prisoners before we could come. What then is your rede? Could we find where the tunnel lay? Squire Nigel, I know not what is to prevent us from digging down upon it, and breaking into it so that both fort and castle are at our mercy before either knows that we are there. Nigel clapped his hands with joy. For God, he cried, it is a most noble plan. But alas, Simon, I see not how we can tell the course of this passage or where we should dig. I have peasants yonder with spades, said Simon. They are two of my friends, Harding of Barnstable and West Country John, who are waiting for us with their gear. If you will come to lead us, Squire Nigel, we are ready to venture our bodies in the attempt. What would Noel say in case they failed? The thought flashed through Nigel's mind, but another came swiftly behind it. He would not venture further unless he found hopes of success. And if he did venture further, he would put his life upon it, giving that he made amends for all errors. And if on the other hand success crowned their efforts, then Knowles would forgive his failure at the gateway. A minute later, every doubt banished from his mind, he was making his way through the darkness under the guidance of Black Simon. Outside the camp, the two other men-at-arms were waiting for them, and the four advanced together. Presently a little group of figures loomed up in the darkness. It was a cloudy night, and a thin rain was falling which obscured both the castle and the fort, but a stone had been placed by Simon in the daytime which assured that they were between the two. Is blind Andreas there? Asked Simon. Yes, kind sir, I am here, said a voice. This man, said Simon, was once rich and of good repute, but he was beggared by this robber lord, who afterward put out his eyes so that he has lived for many years in darkness at the charity of others. How can he help us in our enterprise if he be indeed blind? Asked Nigel. It is for that very reason, fair lord, that he can be of greater service than any other man, Simon answered. For it often happens that when a man has lost a sense, the good God will strengthen those that remain. Hence it is that Andreas has such ears that he can hear the sap in the trees or the cheep of the mouse in its burrow. He has come to help us to find the tunnel. And I have found it, said the blind man proudly. Here I have placed my staff upon the line of it. Twice as I lay there with my ear to the ground, I have heard footsteps pass beneath me. I trust you make no mistake, old man, said Nigel. For answer the blind man raised his staff and smote twice upon the ground, once to the right and once to the left. The one gave a dull thud, the other a hollow boom. Can you not hear that? He asked. Will you ask me now if I make a mistake? Indeed, we are much beholden to you, cried Nigel. Let the peasants dig then, and as silently as they may. Do you keep your ear upon the ground, Andreas, so that if anyone pass beneath us we shall be warned. So, amid the driving rain, the little group toiled in the darkness. The blind man lay silent, flat upon his face, and twice they heard his warning hiss and stopped their work, while some one passed beneath. In an hour they had dug down to a stone arch which was clearly the outer side of the tunnel roof. Here was a sad obstacle, for it might take long to loosen a stone, and if their work was not done by the break of day, then their enterprise was indeed hopeless. They loosened the mortar with a dagger, and at last dislodged one small stone which enabled them to get the others. Presently a dark hole blacker than the night around them yawned at their feet, and their swords could touch no bottom to it. They had opened the tunnel. I would fain enter it first, said Nigel. I pray you to lower me down. They held him to the full length of their arms, and then letting him drop they heard him land safely beneath them. An instant later, the blind man started up with a low cry of alarm. "I hear steps coming," said he. "They are far off, but they draw nearer." Simon thrust his head and neck down the hole. "Squire Nigel," he whispered, "can you hear me?" "I can hear you, Simon. Andreas says that someone comes." "Then cover over the hole," came the answer. "Quick, I pray you, cover it over." A mantle was stretched across it, so that no glimmer of light should warn the newcomer. The fear was that he might have heard the sound of Nigel's descent. But soon it was clear that he had not done so, for Andreas announced that he was still advancing. Presently Nigel could hear the distant thud of his feet. If he bore a lantern, all was lost. But no gleam of light appeared in the black tunnel, and still the footsteps drew nearer. Nigel breathed a prayer of thanks to all his guardian saints as he crouched close to the slimy wall and waited breathless, his dagger in his hand. Nearer yet and nearer came the steps. He could hear the stranger's coarse breathing in the darkness. Then as he brushed past, Nigel bounded upon him with a tiger spring. There was one gasp of astonishment, and not a sound more, for the squire's grip was on the man's throat and his body was pinned motionless against the wall. "Simon, Simon," cried Nigel loudly. The mantle was moved from the hole. "Have you a cord? Or your belts linked together may serve." One of the peasants had a rope, and Nigel soon felt it dangling against his hand. He listened, and there was no sound in the passage. For an instant he released his captive's throat. A torrent of prayers and entreaties came forth. The man was shaking like a leaf in the wind. Nigel pressed the point of his dagger against his face and dared him to open his lips. Then he slipped the rope beneath his arms and tied it. "Pull him up," he whispered, and for an instant the gray glimmer above him was obscured. "We have him, fair sir," said Simon. "Then drop me the rope and hold it fast." A moment later Nigel stood among the group of men who had gathered round their captive. It was too dark to see him, and they dared not strike flint and steel. Simon passed his hand roughly over him and felt a fat, clean-shaven face, and a cloth gabardine which hung to the ankles. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Speak the truth, and speak it low, if you would ever speak again." The man's teeth chattered in his head with cold and fright. "I speak no English," he murmured. "French? Then," said Nigel, "I am a holy priest of God. You caught the ban of Holy Church when you lay hands upon me. I pray you let me go upon my way, for there are those whom I would shrive and housel. If they should die in sin, their damnation is upon you." "How are you called, then?" "I am Dom Peter de Savos." De Savos, the archpriest, he who heated the brazier when it burned out my eyes, cried old Andreas. "Of all the devils in hell there is none fouler than this one. Friends, if I have done aught for you this night, I ask but one reward, that ye let me have my will of this man." But Nigel pushed the old man back. "There is no time for this," he said. "Now hark you, priest. If priest indeed you be, your gown and tonsure will not save you if you play us false. For we are here of a set purpose, and we will go forward with it, come what may. Answer me and answer me truly, or it will be an ill night for you. In what part of the castle does this tunnel enter?" "In the lower cellar." "What is at the end?" "An oaken door." "Is it barred?" "Yes, it is barred." "How would you have entered?" "I would have given the password." "Who then would have opened?" "There is a guard within." "And beyond him?" "Beyond him are the prison cells and the jailers." "Who else would be afoot?" "No one save a guard at the gate and another on the battlement." "What then is a password?" The man was silent. "The password, fellow." The cold points of 2 daggers pricked his throat, but still he would not speak. "Where is the blind man?" asked Nigel. "Here, Andreas. You can have him and do what you will with him." Nay, the priest whimpered. "Keep him off me. Save me from blind Andreas. I will tell you everything." "The password, then, this instant." "It has been a decide." "We have the password, Simon," cried Nigel. "Come then, let us on to the farther end. These peasants will guard the priest, and they will remain here lest we wish to send a message." "Nay, fair sir, it is in my mind that we can do better. said Simon. "Let us take the priest with us, so that he who is within may know his voice." "It is well thought of," said Nigel. "And first let us pray together, for indeed this night may well be our last." He and the 3 men-at-arms knelt in the rain and sent up their simple orisons, Simon still clutching tight to his prisoner's wrist. The priest fumbled in his breast and drew something forth. "It is the heart of the blessed confessor Saint Enegat," said he. "It may be that it will ease and assoil your souls if you would wish to handle it." The 4 Englishmen passed the flat silver case from hand to hand, each pressing his lips devoutly upon it. Then they rose to their feet. Nigel was the first to lower himself down the hole. Then Simon. Then the priest, who was instantly seized by the other 2. The men-at-arms followed them. They had scarcely moved away from the hole when Nigel stopped. "Surely someone else came after us," said he. They listened, but no whisper or rustle came from behind them. For a minute they paused and then resumed their journey through the dark. It seemed a long, long way, though in truth it was but a few hundred yards before they came to a door with a glimmer of yellow light around it, which barred their passage. Nigel struck upon it with his hand. There was the rasping of a bolt and then a loud voice. "Is that you, priest?" "Yes, it is I," said the prisoner in a quavering voice. "Open, Arnold." The voice was enough. There was no question of passwords. The door swung inward, and in an instant the janitor was cut down by Nigel and Simon. So sudden and so fierce was the attack that save for the thud of his body no sound was heard. A flood of light burst outward into the passage, and the Englishmen stood with blinking eyes in its glare. In front of them lay a stone-flagged corridor, across which lay the dead body of the janitor. It had doors on either side of it, and another grated door at the farther end. A strange hubbub, a kind of low droning and whining, filled the air. The 4 men were standing listening, full of wonder as to what this might mean, when a sharp cry came from behind them. The priest lay in a shapeless heap upon the ground, and the blood was rushing from his gaping throat. Down the passage, a black shadow in the yellow light, there fled a crouching man, who clattered with a stick as he went. "It is Andreas," cried West Country Will. "He has slain him." "Then it was he that I heard behind us," said Nigel. "Doubtless he was at our very heels in the darkness. I fear that the priest's cry has been heard." "Nay," said Simon, "there are so many cries that one more may well pass. Let us take this lamp from the wall, and see what sort of devil's den we have around us." They opened the door upon the right, and so horrible a smell issued from it that they were driven back from it. The lamp which Simon held forward showed a monkey-like creature mowing and grimacing in the corner. Man or woman none could tell, but driven crazy by loneliness and horror. In the other cell was a grey-bearded man fettered to the wall, looking blankly before him, a body without a soul, yet with life still in him, for his dull eyes turned slowly in their direction. But it was from behind the central door at the end of the passage that the chorus of sad cries came which filled the air. "Simon," said Nigel, "before we go farther we will take this outer door from its hinges. With it we will block this passage so that at the worst we may hold our ground here until help comes. Do you back to the camp as fast as your feet can bear you. The peasants will draw you upward through the hole. Give my greetings to Sir Robert and tell him that the castle is taken without fail if he comes this way with 50 men. Say that we have made a lodgment within the walls. And tell him also, Simon, that I would counsel him to make a stir before the gateway so that the guard may be held there whilst we make good our footing behind them. Go, good Simon, and lose no moment." But the man-at-arms shook his head. "It is I who have brought you here, fair sir, and here I bide through fair and foul. But you speak wisely and well, for Sir Robert should indeed be told what is going forward now that we have gone so far. Harding, do you go with all speed and bear the gentle Nigel's message." Reluctantly the man-at-arms sped upon his errand. They could hear the racing of his feet and the low jingle of his harness, until they died away in the tunnel. Then the 3 companions approached the door at the end. It was their intention to wait where they were until help should come, but suddenly amid the babel of cries within there broke forth an English voice, shouting in torment. "My God," it cried, "I pray you, comrades, for a cup of water, as you hope for Christ's mercy." A shout of laughter and the thud of a heavy blow followed the appeal. All the hot blood rushed to Nigel's head at the sound, buzzing in his ears and throbbing in his temples. There are times when the fiery heart of a man must overbear the cold brain of a soldier. With one bound he was at the door. With another he was through it, the men-at-arms at his heels. So strange was the scene before them that for an instant all three stood motionless with horror and surprise. It was a great vaulted chamber, brightly lit by many torches. At the farther end roared a great fire. In front of it 3 naked men were chained to posts in such a way that, flinch as they might, they could never get beyond the range of its scorching heat. Yet they were so far from it that no actual burn would be inflicted if they could but keep turning and shifting so as continually to present some fresh portion of their flesh to the flames. Hence they danced and whirled in front of the fire, tossing ceaselessly this way and that within the compass of their chains, wearied to death, their protruding tongues cracked and blackened with thirst, but unable for one instant to rest from their writhings and contortions. Even stranger was the sight at each side of the room, whence came that chorus of groans which had first struck upon the ears of Nigel and his companions. A line of great hogsheads were placed alongside the walls, and within each sat a man, his head protruding from the top. As they moved within there was a constant splashing and washing of water. The white WAN faces all turned together as the door flew open, and a cry of amazement and a hope took the place of those long-drawn moans of despair. At the same instant 2 fellows clad in black, who had been seated with a flagon of wine between them at a table near the fire, sprang wildly to their feet, staring with blank amazement at this sudden inrush. That instant of delay deprived them of their last chance of safety. Midway down the room was a flight of stone steps which led to the main door. Swift as a wildcat, Nigel bounded toward it and gained the steps a stride or 2 before the jailers. They turned and made for the other which led to the passage, but Simon and his comrades were nearer to it than they. 2 sweeping blows, 2 dagger thrusts into writhing figures, and the ruffians who worked the will of the butcher lay dead upon the floor of their slaughterhouse. Oh, the buzz of joy and a prayer from all those white lips. Oh, the light of returning hope in all those sunken weary eyes. One wild shout would have gone up had not Nigel's outstretched hands and warning voice hushed them to silence. He opened the door behind him. A curving newel staircase wound upward into the darkness. He listened, but no sound came down. There was a key in the outer lock of the iron door. He whipped it out and turned it on the inner side. The ground that they had gained was safe. Now they could turn to the relief of these poor fellows beside them. A few strong blows struck off the irons and freed the 3 dancers before the fire. With a husky croak of joy, they rushed across to their comrades' water barrels, plunged their heads in like horses, and drank and drank and drank. Then in turn the poor shivering wretches were taken out of the barrels, their skins bleached and wrinkled with long soaking. Their bonds were torn from them, but, cramped and fixed, their limbs refused to act, and they tumbled and twisted upon the floor in their efforts to reach Nigel and to kiss his hand. In a corner lay Aylward, dripping from his barrel and exhausted with cold and hunger. Nigel ran to his side and raised his head. The jug of wine from which the 2 jailers had drunk still stood upon their table. The squire placed it to the archer's lips, and he took a hearty pull at it. "How is it with you now, Aylward?" "Better, squire, better. But may I never touch water again as long as I live. Alas, poor Dickon has gone, and Stephen also, the life chilled out of them. The cold is in the very marrow of my bones. I pray you, let me lean upon your arm as far as the fire, that I may warm the frozen blood, and set it running in my veins once more." A strange sight it was to see these 20 naked men crouching in a half-circle round the fire with their trembling hands extended to the blaze. Soon their tongues at least were thawed, and they poured out the story of their troubles with many a prayer and ejaculation to the saints for their safe delivery. No food had crossed their lips since they had been taken. The butcher had commanded them to join his garrison, and to shoot upon their comrades from the wall. When they refused, he had set aside 3 of them for execution. The others had been dragged to the cellar, whither the leering tyrant had followed them. Only one question he had asked them, whether they were of a hot-blooded nature or of a cold. Blows were showered upon them until they answered. 3 had said cold, and had been condemned to the torment of the fire. The rest who had said hot were delivered up to the torture of the water cask. Every few hours this man or fiend had come down to exult over their sufferings and asked them whether they were ready yet to enter his service. 3 had consented and were gone, but the others had all of them stood firm, 2 of them even to their death. Such was the tale to which Nigel and his comrades listened whilst they waited impatiently for the coming of Knowles and his men. Many an anxious look did they cast down the black tunnel, but no glimmer of light and no clash of steel came from its depths. Suddenly, however, a loud and measured sound broke upon their ears. It was a dull metallic clang, ponderous and slow, growing louder and ever louder, the tread of an armored man. The poor wretches round the fire, all unnerved by hunger and suffering, huddled together with scared faces, their eyes fixed in terror on the door. "It is he," they whispered. "It is the butcher himself." Nigel had darted to the door and listened intently. There were no footfalls save those of one man. Once sure of that, he softly turned the key in the lock. At the same instant there came a bull's bellow from without. "Ives!" "Bertrand!" cried the voice. "Can you not hear me coming, you drunken varlets? You shall cool your own heads in the water casks, you lazy rascals. What? Not even now? Open, you dogs. Open, I say." He had thrust down the latch, and with a kick he flung the door wide and rushed inward. For an instant he stood motionless, a statue of dull yellow metal, his eyes fixed upon the empty casks and the huddle of naked men. Then with the roar of a trapped lion, he turned, but the door had slammed behind him, and Black Simon, with grim figure and sardonic face, stood between. The butcher looked round him helplessly, for he was unarmed save for his dagger. Then his eyes fell upon Nigel's roses. "You are a gentleman of coat armor," he cried. "I surrender myself to you." "I will not take your surrender, you black villain," said Nigel. "Draw and defend yourself. Simon, give him your sword." "Nay, this is madness," said the blunt man-at-arms. "Why should I give the wasp a sting?" "Give it him, I say. I cannot kill him in cold blood." "But I can," yelled Aylward, who had crept up from the fire. "Come, comrades, by these 10 finger bones. Has he not taught us how cold blood should be warmed?" Like a pack of wolves they were on him, and he clanged upon the floor with a dozen frenzied naked figures clutching and clinging above him. In vain Nigel tried to pull them off. They were mad with rage, these tortured starving men, their eyes fixed and glaring, their hair on end, their teeth gnashing with fury, while they tore at the howling, writhing man. Then with a rattle and clatter they pulled him across the room by his 2 ankles and dragged him into the fire. Nigel shuddered and turned away his eyes as he saw the brazen figure roll out and stagger to his knees, only to be hurled once more into the heart of the blaze. His prisoners screamed with joy and clapped their hands as they pushed him back with their feet, until the armor was too hot for them to touch. Then at last he lay still and glowed darkly red, whilst the naked men danced in a wild half-circle round the fire. But now at last the supports had come. Lights flashed and armor gleamed down the tunnel. The cellar filled with armed men, while from above came the cries and turmoil of the feigned assault upon the gate. Led by Knowles and Nigel, the storming party rushed upward and seized the courtyard. The guard of the gate taken in the rear threw down their weapons and cried for mercy. The gate was thrown open and the assailants rushed in, with hundreds of furious peasants at their heels. Some of the robbers died in hot blood, many in cold, but all died, for Knowles had vowed to give no quarter. Day was just breaking when the last fugitive had been hunted out and slain. From all sides came the yells and whoops of the soldiers with the rending and riving of doors as they burst into the storerooms and treasure chambers. There was a joyous scramble amongst them, for the plunder of 11 years, gold and jewels, satins and velvets, rich plate and noble hangings were all to be had for the taking. The rescued prisoners, their hunger appeased and their clothes restored, led the search for booty. Nigel, leaning on his sword by the gateway, saw Aylward totter past, a huge bundle under each arm, another slung over his back and a smaller packet hanging from his mouth. He dropped it for a moment as he passed his young master. "By these 10 finger bones, I am right glad that I came to the war, and no man could ask for a more goodly life," said he. "I have a present here for every girl in Tilford, and my father need never fear the frown of the sacrist of Waverley again. But how of you, Squire Loring? It standeth not aright that we should gather the harvest whilst you, who sowed it, go forth empty-handed. Come, gentle sir, take these things that I have gathered, and I will go back and find more. But Nigel smiled and shook his head. You have gained what your heart desired, and perchance I have done so also, said he. An instant later Noel strode up to him with outstretched hand. I ask your pardon, Nigel, said he. I have spoken too hotly in my wrath. Nay, fair sir, I was at fault. If we stand here now within this castle, it is to you that I owe it. The king shall know of it, and Chandos also. Can I do aught else, Nigel, to prove to you the high esteem in which I hold you? The squire flushed with pleasure. Do you send a messenger home to England, fair sir, with news of these doings? Surely I must do so. But do not tell me, Nigel, that you would be that messenger. Ask me some other favor, for indeed I cannot let you go. Now God forbid, cried Nigel. By St. Paul, I would not be so caitiff and so thrall as to leave you, when some small deed might still be done. But I would fain send a message by your messenger. To whom? It is to the Lady Mary, daughter of old Sir John Butterthorne, who dwells near Guildford. But you will write the message, Nigel. Such greetings as a cavalier sends to his lady love should be under seal. Nay, he can carry my message by word of mouth. Then I shall tell him, for he goes this morning. What message, then, shall he say to the lady? He will give her my very humble greeting, and he will say to her that for the second time St. Catherine has been our friend.